do consider speeding up with settings to consume this content in a fraction of the time. Newbie Dice Podcast.
Hi, I'm Adam Ballard, U.S. representative on this podcast today.
Hi, Yan Lai. I'm a player in Melbourne, Australia.
Jeff Trace from Sydney, Australia, and always happy to join Paige. So looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. And we have myself, Paige, from Singapore. And today we have a star-studded cast. We have two masters, am I right? We have Adam and Jeff from two different continents. And of course, Yan is quite a pro player himself. I've fought him at least twice, I think.
Not so sure about the pro bit, but yeah, I represent the everyman's perspective on this podcast.
Yes,
the two,
and a very good painter as well.
Awesome. So first up, Newbie Dice is on its 4th episode, and this episode we're going to talk about the changes to the Big Red Book, and we have some pros and semi-pros at least to weigh in on this. I'm sure Ian is quite a pro player, and so before we start off, let's have each of you just give a little bit of background on yourself, a little bit of your gamer origin story and your credentials. All right, so we'll start things off in the same order. So we'll have Adam, do introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Adam Ballard from Omaha, Nebraska here in the United States. I've been playing Kings of War since the downfall of Warhammer, so I'm a Warhammer refugee, as we like to call them. Been playing war games for quite a long time, but love my Kings of War. In the Kings of War community, I'm one of the representatives for the U.S. Masters Council, so I try to keep everybody informed and give the people what they want when it comes to U.S. Masters. And I happen to be the winner of the previous year's U.S. Masters, so that's my biggest highlight of my life. There we go. On to Yam.
Awesome.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, like I said before, I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I've been playing Kings for I think it's about coming up to 5 years now. I was an old Warhammer fantasy player as well, but I reckon I had a bit of a break between 7 and 8, so I kind of stuck towards the start of 8 and didn't really play much of 8th edition in fantasy. And then, I did all the other stuff in life, and then had kids, and then realized I'll be stuck at home for a little bit. So I decided to pick painting back up, and some of my old mates from Warhammer got me into Kings. And I've been sort of hooked ever since. So I've been playing war games for, I guess, over 20 years, since I was a teenager. Usually just in fantasy, doing a lot of painting. I just always enjoyed the hobby. And that's pretty much, that's my credentials. I don't think I really have any credentials, unlike Jeff and Adam. I did a bit of play testing on behalf of Mantic for the past couple of years so far. I think I'm an okay player, but I wouldn't really sort of be blowing my own horn too much in that sense.
being a little bit humble there, but I think you tend to finish at least on the top half of every tournament that you're in. And more interestingly, I think you've been in Singapore for a while. So do tell us more about that.
Yeah, I was actually born in Malaysia, and I spent about 13 years in Singapore until I was about 16, and then I moved to Australia, and then I've been in Australia ever since. So I spent a lot of time in Singapore. Love the country, love the people, love the food. It's a great place to be. I started playing war games in Singapore. I'm not sure how old you are, Paige, but I was there when I think Warhammer came in. Games Workshop came into Singapore and then left within a few years. It closed.
36.
Years.
Are you around my age?
Yeah, that's right. So you would been there when that happened. So I started playing when GW came into Singapore. I guess when I was about probably 14 or something when that came in. So that was my time in Singapore. It was good.
Awesome. Then you glad to have you on the show. And if you ever stop by to Singapore, do drop me a message and we'll catch up over some games.
Yeah, I'm sure I will, definitely will.
And next up, we have our Australian master, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm another Warhammer refugee. Been playing for about 20-something years, I suppose, with Fantasy, War Machine, and then Kings of War. And Kings of War, hands down, has been my favourite. Love the people in it, love the game, the rule set. Always enjoy getting in and playing. That's my number one thing. I'm not as well known for painting or anything, but I love playing. I love playing. And now I've got, as I was explaining, I've got lots of kids and they all do different things. And one of them's a very good painter and he's getting into Kings of War now. So you'll be expecting to see some new armies coming out.
So that,
nice paint jobs.
That was the ultimate plan, to get somebody to paint your army.
Yeah, with tournaments, I've won 3 of the last 4 Masters in Australia. So current at the moment. And won most all the major ones in Australia that I've run at one time or another. But always looking forward to the next game.
It's usually the surprise when Jeff doesn't win. So that's kind of how consistent he is,
Awesome. So thank you, Jeff. And Jeff and I go a little bit while back because he's one of the first supporters of my battle reports, actually. He started watching and dropped me a private message saying that he enjoys my battle reports and technical analysis. And so we started to play some games together. And yeah, it's been pretty close.
Yeah,
but he edged out on me. I think the scores were like 3-2 and 2 draws or something like that. You can catch all of them on my channel. And so just a quick one about myself. I started wargaming only 10 years ago when I started working, because war games is quite an expensive hobby. So only when I started working did I get into war games. And I started with 1 year of Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. So the last edition was where I came in. I played it for 1 year. I didn't really like it because locally we were playing the ETC format, and I didn't like that each faction is shoehorned to a certain role. And so, like, if I play this army, I'm playing this role. That's it. So I find I don't know what's the point. So then I started to play War Machine and Horde. So I went quite heavy into that for 3 years. And after that, I was a bit burned out by that game. It was full of gotchas like, oh, you got to remember that this new character gives this a 2-inch charge buff. So it's like, putting this out of charge range? No, it gets charged, and then I lose the game. So it's like, don't really enjoy that anymore. So I was looking at Kings and I dived into Kings. It was 2nd edition. Uncharted Empires was in beta testing at that time. So yeah, that's my Wargamer credentials. I've taken part in quite a few, because I'm from Singapore, right? We have a strong but small community. I think we have 20 plus players that move in and out of the game. But if we were to hold an event, maybe 8 to 10 people will show up. And so I like to play competitively. So I've been participating in the last few Call to Arms tournaments. Played pretty well in a few of them. But now life has hit me hard with 2 children, two kids to the knee. And I have been having trouble keep playing as much as I had. But that's how life is. I'm still quite involved in the game, quite liking this game, and hence this podcast is born. So let's talk about the Big Red Book. Okay, so we'll start off with some high-level changes to take note of, and then we'll go into details. And by the way, I will be uploading this onto YouTube and podcast, so you can watch it in both formats. On YouTube, you'll just see our handsome and ugly faces. We'll leave it up to you to decipher which is which. Okay, and so I try not to display stuff on video so that you come out pretty much the same on podcast. So in terms of high-level changes to this book, we have smart charges. That means when you charge units on multiple flanks, you're able to shift in a way that you could fit all the units in. Okay, we'll go through in detail later. Most of the heavy cavalry regiments with like 16 attacks and thunderous charge 2, they got a little bit cheaper. In Norse cover, in the last edition, it has changed a bit that it doesn't ignore all types of cover. So it doesn't ignore cover when you're in terrain, namely forests and water. So now they kind of codify it a bit further by splitting it into ignores obscured or ignores concealed. Okay, most of the ballistas in the games got a little bit cheaper. Some of them got extra roofs. And in the allies segment, they did say that it is not recommended in competitive format. And the biggest, most controversial change of them all is that withdrawal is now optional, right? So I think everyone has some things to say about that. So we'll get to that very shortly. First up, let's talk about charges. There's a lot of diagrams in the charges right now, and some of them were ported over from the FAQ. So that really helps in clarifying a lot of situations. Let's see, proximity to enemy new diagram. So multiple charges against the same target. So especially on different flanks, I really like how they've written it. They said that, you know, you only slide them off center to accommodate another unit in a different flank, and only if that's the only way to complete the charge. So there is no ambiguity there. If you can complete it without sliding it off center, you do that. If you have to slide one of the sides off center, you do that so that you can fit it in. So what do you guys think of this change?
Yeah, I think it's a good change. Number of times you get into those multiple charges and you're trying to go one way and then trying to move another unit to go into it. And this just makes it so much cleaner, so much simpler to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my favorite thing about this change is it actually slightly buffs certain types of units that I want to see more of in general. Mainly horde units like infantry hordes, cavalry hordes, or even legions of that type. Usually those are pretty unwieldy and very difficult to get into combats and manage multiple combats with. But with the change to this, I think that you're going to see a lot more possibilities come up that'll allow them to get into combats when before they wouldn't have been able to.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with everyone's comments. I think it's a good change. I think it makes it simpler. It makes, you know, it's easier to explain it to new players as well when you don't have to say, okay, you got to declare in this particular order before you get your charges all in. I think it's a good change. I did wonder whether you can deliberately cause shuffling. So move your charges in a way that particular order will result in a favorable shuffle for you, or favorable endpoint of a unit. It hasn't come up for me yet, but I think it is a possibility. I don't know if that's a bad thing or necessarily bad or good thing, but I think it could come up.
I think it's a great thing because it just adds an extra layer of tactics to the game, while also simplifying the rules, like you said,
Yeah. To add on to Ian's question is that, yes, there are sometimes two ways to resolve it. So if you charge the front first, the front will shuffle off center and then the flank comes in. If you charge the flank first, the flank will shuffle off center and then the front comes in. But that being said, even before this new change, it is still the same thing, right? When you charge the flank first followed by the front, or the front first followed by the flank, you will end up in two different board states. So this is not something that spawns something new. It didn't spawn a new problem, right? It's still the same. It's just that you can slide off center now. Yeah.
Right. I guess I was just thinking more along the lines of, if you move, so not a particular combat. If you move a separate movement, a separate unit, so you move a particular unit before you declare that particular charge. Prior to this rule happening, you would, there was only one way to do it, only one way to get them in. So you would have to declare in that particular order. But with the new rule, you could essentially move certain things in a particular order to ensure that you get a particular outcome, right? Which, look, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think overall it simplifies things, but as Adam says, it provides a level of complexity for people who are playing at an advanced level. So I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, it's like putting that standard barrel in the forest so that your unit dodges it. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I just based on the wording, which I think the wording deliberately says unless it's otherwise unable to. If it's otherwise unable to complete the charge, that's when you shuffle. So I wonder whether people will argue, if you didn't move this unit first, then you could complete it without shuffling, but only because you did this first, that causes it to shuffle. I don't know if people will argue that rules lawyer situation.
Well, that answers it.
Yeah.
In itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it also, in multi-charges in general, it states that you decide in the order in which they move, and you move them to their final position. So when you're multi-charging, you move what you want to move, and the final position's already predetermined because of how they physically can fit. If they physically can't fit in the final position, then it's not a legal charge. So I think that you can use that to kind of counter what you were saying there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't have to worry about that part. It's always been played like this. You can move all the stuff before you start declaring the charge, and only when you declare the charge, all the conditions are being checked at that moment.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. So next up is the most controversial change of them all, which is withdraw is now optional. And also, if you were to play with the withdraw rules, you get a -1 to hit when you're declaring a new charge after withdrawing. Okay, so first up, let's go around the table and see, are you in favor of playing with or without withdraw, and your comments on that afterwards. So let's start things off with Jeff. What do you think?
I'd rather keep the withdraw rule personally. I think it adds to it. A lot of people complain about gotcha movements. To me, that's just not looking far enough ahead. I've got caught out myself, and that's fine. I look at it and say, well, I should have looked better at the position and realised that could have happened. So I think it adds to the game having withdrawal rule, but yeah, that's my opinion on it.
Even when I played against Jeff, there was once in early third edition, I got caught out by the withdrawal rules. I moved my unit just past the front arc of Tree Herder, but because he withdrew 1 inch, I'm back in his arc and he charged it in the flank.
Oh, I think we both got caught each other in one game or another, I'm sure.
Well, that was part of the game, but all right, let's move to Yan. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think for most of us who've been playing with this rule for quite a number of years now, I think we're all used to it. So I like it. I like the tactical aspect of thinking about it and using it myself. So I'm happy that to keep it, and I'm also happy for the neg 1. I think it's a sensible change. It applies a penalty. It is slightly annoying, I think, that a unit can, especially not so much a corkscrew charge like a nimble unit, but a unit that just so happens to withdraw and can pivot 90 to go into a flank of another one and then kill it and then turn around again. It is slightly illogical, I agree. But if we're talking from a game perspective, a game mechanic and a game like flavor and complexity, I think it's fine. I think you get used to it and I think you work around it, right? So I'm happy to keep it myself, but I do recognize the issue that I think the optional withdraw rule came in because Mantic were in favor of getting rid of it, because when they were demonstrating the game to new players, it became a problem when you had to say, okay, units of this particular size, because of the geometry, you can go back an inch, and it's a rule that came up as a result of the geometric shapes that was embedded in the game. So it wasn't a deliberate result of any sort of game design. It just worked out that way, right? And it is hard to explain to newbies. And when it was pulled on me when I first started playing, it did feel a bit like, oh, well, that was gross. I just put a unit right in front of you, and you just like went around it and killed my unit. Just that was an odd mechanic, but you get used to it. So from my argument, if you play the game long enough, you'll learn to love it. but I get it. If people get turned off from that mechanic, before they even get started playing the game, and it sort of discourages people from coming in, then fair enough. And conversely, I think if it was gone, I think people would just get used to that too. right? I think you'll come up with other strategies again to play without that rule, right? Because so yeah. So look, I'm happy to have gone both ways. I'm happy it's staying. I like the rule. I don't think it should have been kept optional, because I think it just confuses people then, because it's like, you play online and it's like, oh, are we playing with draw? Are we not playing with draw? And then you forget because you're so used to playing with one and the other, and then and then you forget when you're playing, in the other scenario. So I think they should have just made a decision one way or the other. I think people would have gotten used to it. I don't think it's that controversial. I don't think, either way would have destroyed the game, to be honest. But that's my opinion.
All right, let's go on to Adam now.
I mean, I agree with both Jeff and Jan here. I love the withdrawal rule. I think it's embedded in the game tactically, and I've played games without it. I play tested this when they were discussing the whole process of potentially removing it. And unfortunately, the game just got very stale. It became a game of what unit's better. Okay, they're just gonna hit each other in the front, and we're just stuck there and rolling dice until it's over. It just, without the withdrawal rule, the tactical options are very limited, and it also limits many other things outside the game. Outside the actual just combat. So one of the big things that I found was you can't just side shuffle a unit out of the way. So it happens quite often where you just don't want this unit to be, you have another unit behind the one that's in combat. You want to get the unit behind into the combat, but the unit in front's still there. So you withdraw and then sidestep, and the other unit can get in. If you're playing the option without withdraw, you can't side shuffle and get that unit out of there. It's stuck. There's no way of leaving unless you just have it die. So I'm a fan of it because the tactics that come with it. I think that in the future, if withdraw is removed, potentially 4th edition down the line, I think they just need to incorporate other rules that provide the tactical options that aren't currently in the 3rd edition rule set to support a non-withdraw game. So, I really love the -1 to hit that they added into it. I think that's a great change. I wish they went even further, though, because units don't need to withdraw in order to hit something else in a different combat. If you're on a square base and you're nimble, or if you're on a chariot size base where you're deeper than you are wider, you're going to be able to charge other units that you can see, over top of the unit you're currently in, without even withdrawing, and avoid that -1 penalty. So I think that you're going to see kind of a rise in those types of units potentially because of that factor. But I really do like the rule, the wording. It affects units that are being surged as well. So I think they hit it on the head with that. I just wish that they didn't limit it to withdraw. I wish they added just disengage.
To like the nimble 40-50 mils. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So
look, I think Adam, you're an Empire of Dust player as well, I think, and so that's one of my main armies, and I think without withdraw, it really cans the surge mechanic, because surge really needs that flexibility of staying away from that by that 1 inch and then surging back in and finding flanks, and then I think. Look, I haven't really tried it heaps enough, I would say. Like, there were a few games playing Empire Dust without the withdraw. And yeah, it really changes the army, the mechanics of the army, and you're left with trying to get really long surges, like, which is not something I like to rely on anyway. I think surges should be 1 inch, 2 inch max, before you rely on it. And if you're going for the long surge into a flank just based on the angle, it changes the army significantly, and I personally think it reduces that power level of Empire of Dust. And I don't think Empire of Dust have been like sort of dominating events anyway. So Yeah, I think it's as you say, Adam. I think if they'd remove it, there needs to be a tweak to maybe the proximity to enemy rule, how units function with staying within 1 inch, or potentially I think as well, what a good compromise might be would be embedding it into maybe the nimble special rule. The ability to withdraw, it doesn't break people's immersion, right? It's like Cav and and nimble things can pull away and get out of combat to fight something else. That kind of makes sense, but yeah,
I really like that. I really like that idea that nimble would allow you other options if withdraw is removed in the future. I think that's a very good possibility to incorporate in a future edition.
Yeah, so I've actually been silently observing all the discussions on withdraw over the past few weeks on Fanatics and whatnot. And yeah, I tried to attack this from a game design point of view. I think the main problem with withdraw is not in the corkscrew or charging things in the flank, the guy that's next to you, but it's that it is often confused with disengage. And the terminology sounds very similar from an English language perspective. And a lot of players, newbies, or even veteran players who don't play that often, or they don't really read into the minutiae of the rules, they often get confused with these two terms. And then like when you have to explain to them, hey, this is disengage. Disengage is the act of getting out of engagement. Withdraw is that free 1 inch bounce back, and then they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And then if they will have to come to this realization in a game, it might not sit well with them. So that's one of the main problems of withdraw. And so for people who say, let's eliminate withdraw because of corkscrew charges, well, that's not the solution, because like Adam has alluded earlier, your square bases can still charge, can still do corkscrew shenanigans, or even just turn 90 degrees and charge something beside you. Same for chariot bases or anything that's deeper than it is wider. And so it becomes rarer now, and it will catch more people off when it actually do happen. I don't mind that it's making square bases and chariot bases stronger because they are less represented in the game anyway, because Kings of War, a lot of times...
Jeff disagrees though.
Yeah, you know what my armies are like.
I was going to say, at least at the higher competitive levels, you see a lot of them because of the ability to maneuver more easily than other units. So
monster bases, right?
Yeah, square bases or chariot bases, they can do things that others can't.
Yeah, movement over power.
My Nightstalker list that I won Masters with, it had let me count here, 2, 4, 6. It had 8 square bases that were all nimble, and that's not by coincidence. So
yeah, I guess
I think Jeff, yours had 9, right? The recent Varangur list you've been running?
The one I won Convict with had 9, and the one I won the last tournament had 7.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to beat with a conventional list. Like when you're running that many small nimble scoring units that are usually a 15, 17, defense 5 at least. That sort of ballpark nerve. Yeah. Just too many units to deal with in that amount of turns that you have, I think.
Yeah, I guess monsters and large infantry heroes are the square bases that are really very popular, and to some extent maybe titans or chariot heroes, but I'm more thinking like chariot legions. They are so long and big footprints are usually not very popular.
Yeah, those.
And I'm thinking more along the lines of infantry hordes versus like a large infantry horde. The large infantry horde is like the favorite footprint of this entire game since 2nd to 3rd edition for big units, like units with lots of attacks. So the geometric shape was one of the reasons. So If we can pull away some of the strengths from the large infantry horde size, I think I'm fine with that. So back to withdraw. So I think the issue is with withdraw and disengage. I think why the RC or Mantic is making it optional because I think they want to get rid of withdraw, but they just want to leave it out there and see what people think about it, and then make a decision based on people's reaction and where the general community is heading towards. So let the community sort itself out. What I would appreciate is that they release a statement on this, but they never did. So they say, hey, look, withdraw is a little bit clunky. We are thinking of removing it, but right now it's optional. You guys can try it out and let us know which one you prefer, and we'll look into it again, 4th edition. And if they release a statement like that, whether through Mantic directly or through the RC, I would appreciate that a lot, and I think it would cause less controversy in the forums. And yeah, I think communication is a little bit key here.
So might be a little insider information, but my understanding of what withdraw, I don't think they had enough time for this book, but I think what they want to have done with withdraw and other rules that may be what they're calling advanced rules is have a similar layout to what they have in Armada. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Armada, but one of the big things that I really like about the game is they have effectively what they call the beginner rule set, and then they have the advanced rules. So beginner rule set is great for entry level players just getting into the game, wanting to learn, and just kind of roll some dice, see if they like the game. And then the advanced rules are a couple of more optional, basically tactical rules that add more depth to the game, but aren't necessary in order to play the game with the base rule set. So I think what Mantic wants to, or what I personally would like to see, is Kings of War have a basic rule set and then the advanced rules, which withdraw would be included in that, potentially other rules that may become more of a controversy, or I know it's been said like gotcha moments. So I think they want to make it very simple for people to get into the game of Kings of War. And I know that Ambush, it sounds like, is a lot of people have liked the sounds of that, so they might do something like that. We're breaking up Ambush as like the beginner rule set and then advanced rules with the Kings of Wars. So I think that's what they want to do. I don't think they started that roadmap early enough in the process of the big red book here, but I'm hoping that it cleans up in 4th edition so that, like you said, Paige, we have a little bit more clear understanding of what is intended for these rules versus just putting it in there and saying optional.
Yeah, that seems like a logical thing to do if we're keeping it. Yeah, and I think one of the complaints that I've read as well is the fact that it's not articulated in the rule book about how to do it. How, like, whatever corkscrew and the withdrawal charge situation is actually meant to be, which is, I guess, a fair point. You know, look, I think for people who've come from Games Workshop games, there's always been a legacy of this sort of tactics where people have figured out, you know, whether it's like stringing things in a line or whatever else to get particular combos off, right? And this is no different. But, you know, I think if they're gonna aim towards an accessible game, you know, Kings of War is not that complex that I think that they can't articulate each of these sort of tactics that people have essentially uncovered as a result of play. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, it might satisfy everyone really with doing that.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to point out, or you're probably going to mention this, Paige. Go ahead.
They did add a note on page 18 regarding disengage that they might note this means some units might be able to leave a fight and attack something else. So this will be typically large monsters and titans with square bases that can see over obstacles and to other more juicy targets. So No diagrams, but just a warning message, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, is good and all, but it could have been more. I appreciate the effort that it's clarifying that, yes, they can do this, but it's not really explaining how that can be done. So, a newer player reading that rule is going to be kind of scratching their head and probably be like, well, I'm not going to worry about it. And then it's going to happen to them on the tabletop at some point, and they'll eventually go back and realize, oh, now I understand. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see the problem with finding out in game. I mean, it's a game, right? It's not like you play for sheep stations right off the bat. Learning the game. You learn the game, it gets pulled on you, and you don't let it, and you basically know a new rule, and you use it yourself next turn. I don't really see why it's such a big problem to have a gotcha pulled on you. I mean, unless your opponent's really nasty about it, I mean.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, it's like seems
every game's a learning experience. So
right.
And you help. You help the newer players with it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that can read a rule book and then go and effectively apply all the rules they just read onto a table. The best way you learn is by playing it, doing it, seeing it, having it done against you is probably the fastest way to learn.
Yeah, and discussing it while you're doing it too.
Absolutely.
I do think if they were to keep the withdrawal rules for the next edition, and like what Adam had said, the -1 shouldn't just be applied on withdrawal, or it should rather be if you charge a different target rather than counter charging, then that would also fairly impact the square bases.
Everyone.
Yeah. I do think if withdrawal is to stay in the 4th edition, it do require a little bit more tweaking. The withdrawal rules as of now, or as of just before this big red book, where it was totally rewritten in the errata, it is clean, meaning that there aren't any ambiguous situations. You know exactly how to resolve it, but it's not elegant, right? So firstly, you can only withdraw if only after withdrawing. Everything else every enemy is out of 1 inch of you. And then they added this weird condition that's very unintuitive, which is that you cannot advance or at the double after withdrawing. And that is like a rule just to curb search armies, but it's very strange and unintuitive. How come I can't do these 2 actions, especially if you're charged from the side and you're gonna bounce back and there's nothing in front of you and you can't walk forward. So it's quite strange in that aspect.
Yeah, that's the EOD buster right there, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it shaved off, I don't know what percentage, but good 20% of efficiency out of the army by not being able to do that, to be honest. It was huge when that came in, and to be honest, like I'm not sure how many people actually remember to do it nowadays, because I think people still get caught out by that caveat.
That you can't move forwards.
Can't move forward. Unless you're a dedicated search player.
Yeah, unfortunately, that edition or that FAQ came out like 2 weeks before US Masters, not this year, but 2 years ago. And I had already submitted my EOD army for that Masters that year, and my 2 Bone Giants were pretty sad that year. So.
Bone Giants, yeah, I love the Bone Giants myself. I think they're a great piece, but that one change, not allowing advance, and now the -1 to hit, and potentially removing withdraw, it's actually like a triple nerf to how that particular piece can be used in the game, which is huge. Like, it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, Shobik is basically just a bigger, badder Bone Giant, and so he's a expensive piece to be playing with right now, with all these addition changes. But I'm sure we'll talk a little more about specific army stuff later.
I'm sure you'll never drop him anyway.
It's still very good.
me personally, no.
No.
Just to round this off on this topic, we have been speaking on this for quite a while. I had the chat with Matt Carmack last night, and he was talking about, if withdraw and disengage is so confusing, often confused together. He said, why not remove disengage instead, which I thought is an interesting idea to focus on. If you clean up the rules such that there's no need for a term of disengage, maybe that will cause less confusion. You keep withdraw, clean it up, and you will be still having all that tactical depth. I thought that was worth exploring. Yep. So with
Absolutely.
that, let's I think we have beaten this dead horse quite enough. So we'll move on to the rest of the rules changes. So terrain, they added a new term called flat terrain. So height 0, when they introduced height 0, it was still not enough. It was still like, so if a height 1 stands behind a height 0, do they get cover? Logically, like if you're standing behind a lake, doesn't seem like it should provide cover. Last time it was never clear. So the community, the players themselves came up with the terminology of flat terrain. And so it seems to be sort of codified, but there is some interesting adds to it. So firstly, it never provides obscuring or blocks line outside if you're standing behind the lake. But if you're in it, instead of being height 0, it is considered height 1 when you're standing in it, for determining whether you are getting terrain from being in cover, which is now called concealed. So that means a titan or giant standing in the water will not get cover from the lake, where in the past it would, right? So now height 1, so the tallest that can be in the lake and benefiting from cover from that would be your height 3, your large infantry, because height 4 onwards you don't get any cover from the lake. So just something to take note of. If you did not notice this change, you might very easily miss that. Okay. I think that's quite explanatory. Anyone wants to add on to that?
No.
I think it's a good,
I like
good clean
I
change.
like the change.
All right.
Good change.
Good change. Yeah.
So I like the change, but at the same time, I don't like it every time we have to add more rules, add more words to a rule. So from a game design point of view, I'm like, is there a more elegant way to do this? But I don't have the answer to that. So I'll just welcome this right now. Okay. So ranged phase. So engaged units and shooting. So this is a very small change, but if somebody charges you, did not deal a damage to disorder you, right? That previously, if you're not damaged in the charge and you withdrew your ranged unit, you withdrew and you shoot, it will be considered that you didn't move, so you don't have a movement penalty. But right now, if you withdraw and shoot, you will get the movement penalty. Penalty to shooting. Of course, quite a lot of units in the game have steady aim, so it doesn't matter. But if you don't have steady aim, if you withdraw and fire, you will get a -1 for moving and shooting. So that's what I noticed when I compared the text between the two rules.
It also affects if that unit was in a forest, we'll say, then they're still going to be covered because they moved. So that is actually a big adjustment.
Yeah, but it doesn't happen all the time, right? Because most of the time, if you get charged, damage will be dealt.
Yeah.
But
right. I'm thinking there are times where like Gladestalkers obviously are a good unit and still will be played. If they charge in and waver a unit, that unit just remains engaged with them, then they themselves can't back up and just shoot for free. They'll take a penalty in those very unique instances, but I think it will come up. So
yeah, so that's the other thing. Sorry, not meaning to go back to disengage, but I believe there's something that needs to be cleaned up around be disengaging and staying within the 1 inch, because sometimes you can't withdraw, either there's something blocking or you can't move back to inch and things like that, and therefore you just disengage. I asked a question to my crossman, who's the RC rep in Australia, and I was saying, if you can't do it, are you just stuck? You can't do anything. You can't turn around. You can't do whatever. And I think that needs to be cleaned up. So you can disengage and stay within the inch and still do stuff. I think I believe that's the case. So in that instance, I would assume you could disengage and just shoot point blank. I'm not sure, but I presume that would be the case. Or, no.
In the current rule set, I think if
to.
you disengage, you have to end out of an inch.
Yep, exactly. So
Yeah, so I think that's why they're saying they're trying to clean it up. I think. Look, we'll wait and see what comes out from that. But because that was the question I asked. If you have your bum facing the wind, like, do you just can't you turn around and face the more threatening opponent? And right now you can't. Right now you can't. And I believe they're looking to change that, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Yeah.
I think I saw a bit of that chatter on Fanatics. I would say that, well, if it's such an unfortunate situation that he charged you, you're not routed, but there's no way for you to disengage because you can't end out of 1 inch of the enemy, then I think that is a tactical superiority of the other player to cause such a situation on you. And if you like to give that option to disengage and stay within 1 inch, I think that might give rise to a lot more unintended situations. So I would caution RC to look at this deeply and say, do you really need to change that? And what if you really want to change that, how many unintended situations might that cause and whether it's worthwhile?
I'm just gonna put out there, it's gonna break Surge armies again. If you can disengage, remain
and turn around, you
can do so much shenanigans with surging.
You can just basically just turn around and surge into something else. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right. So with that, moving on to cover, it's now said that when you're in difficult terrain, you do have to check the difficult terrain height. So that's mainly to curb the shooting hiding in water. All right. Of course, most people play forests as height 6 to 9, so that would be fine. All right. Moving on to melee phase, this is just a clarification. If your unit comes with a random number of attacks, maybe it's D6 plus 6, D6 plus 8, that D6 is rolled and then you double or triple it when you hit in the flank or rear. Sometimes people might ask, I charge you in the flank, do I roll 2d6 or do I roll a d6 and multiply it by 2? So that's just a clarification. Okay, individuals, I don't think yielding has changed. So let's move on to special rules. For Aura, that is mainly a clarification because it was in the FAQ, so they sort of codify it into the Aura special rules because sometimes the Aura gives you Pathfinder, sometimes it gives you Elite. So for Pathfinder, you benefit from it in the movement phase because you start with Pathfinder, you charge out of the Aura. When you contact the enemy, you no longer have Pathfinder, but that means you still benefit from Pathfinder, so you're not hindered. But for you to benefit from combat rules such as Elite, you will have to be within the aura range when you start rolling your attack dice. So your aura giver needs to be there when the combat is happening. Whereas for Pathfinder and Strider auras, you just need it to be in the aura at the start of the movement. Am I right?
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I think one of the main ones that comes up is the Thunderous Charge one, because that's in a few armies now, like Trident Realms with the Thunderous Charge aura. A lot of people get mixed up. Do I start within it? Do I end in it? But it is end in it. So you have to run that character up. A lot of them put spells and that on him, and I usually tell them it's not a great idea because he'll be running around the board a fair bit to use the aura properly.
So to benefit from Thunderous Charge, do you need to be in the aura when you roll your attacks?
Yes.
So, because it gives crushing strength, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right.
Well, it gives Thunderous Charge.
Okay. So with that, Ignore's cover has now been split into Ignore's Obscured and Concealed. So most of the war engines that used to Ignore cover, they have switched to being Ignore Obscured. That means you don't ignore the guys in front of it, obscuring the enemy, the target. But you still do not ignore the terrain. So being in terrain is called concealed now. But ignores concealed are given to some cannon style units. So cannon style units does not. It's kind of confusing. So
it's really confusing. So much so that I feel like it's a step backwards with the split of this rule. I see what they were trying to do, but is it really necessary?
I think it was the thing of saying cover. You get cover by being in woods, but you'd also be saying I get cover by standing behind these units from normal shooting, but not from the cannons and rock lobbers and that sort of thing. So I think they were just trying to clear that up, make it easier for the newer ones.
Well, that's what I thought. That's what I thought the aim was. It was to clear up ignores cover.
Yeah.
So therefore you've concealed and obscured. But I didn't realize they were going to split particular war engines to have ignoring a particular kind of cover. I thought all war engines were staying to be ignores obscured, which is what it was prior. The previous ignores cover, as you say. And I thought it was, but now that, cannons have ignores concealed and rock lobbers have ignores obscured. Look, I think it took me a while to get my head around it as well. Like, I'll be honest, but I think people get used to it. But, and it adds another level of, I guess, whether you call complexity, diversity, tactics, or list building options, whether you take a cannon style unit or a lobber style artillery. Look, I didn't think it was necessary, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Adam, go ahead first.
Oh, okay. I think that this is another instance of maybe trying to get a little bit too much out of something and shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to a rules change. It's, in my mind, it's very similar to how they word withdraw and disengage. It's two words in the English language that mean the same thing. They're synonyms for each other. Obscure and concealed are synonyms. They're the same thing. So now people have to, understand which one's which and what things, ignore which. I think you're just going to get more confusion out of it than you are clarification and more tactical aspects. I personally, for me, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I know what obscure will be. I know what conceal will be. I will be able to get my head around this. From a general game design thing, I don't think this was a step in the right direction for the game. I think that they could have easily just kept it how it was and cleared it up in 4th edition. This might have been just testing the waters for them and give them a better understanding of what they want to do in 4th edition, which, hey, if that's, their game plan, that's great. But personally, I think that you're going to have a lot of questions around this that you could have potentially avoided.
Yeah, I agree with Adam that it's the same as disengage and withdraw. It draws that problem of people constantly getting confused. And for the history of this rule is because that, firstly, they felt that war engines that ignores cover, they are too strong. So then they started to add the rule that, it doesn't ignore all types of cover. So it gives the defending player options to be able to fare better against the war engine, not like something that they totally can't do because they just ignore cover anyway. I will argue with that because you can always keep them out of line of sight by having intervening units or terrain. But so they went ahead with that change, and then it says, then the word ignores cover doesn't make sense anymore, and then they decided to split it up. And then since we're splitting it up, let's keep some units ignore concealed. I don't think that's gonna help. When I rewind it back, I kind of debated with Matt Carmack once again. I'm like, okay, if you'd like to give player agency, the defending player, options of dealing with the war engines, why not you make the war engines, none of them ignore cover, but they hit on 4+, and you tweak the number of blasts so that it kind of remains the same. So instead of blast D3 is a D2, and then I think the math will work out somehow the same, and then you don't have to come up with all this. Firstly, you can remove the rule of ignore cover, and then you don't have all this ignore, this concealed obscure shenanigans. You can eliminate, if you can eliminate rules and remain the same tactical depth, then I'm all for that instead.
Yep, agreed.
All right, next one.
But I think it'll be interesting just to see how it plays out for this, and I think it's a big area of opportunity they've opened up for 4th edition. So I'm excited to see how they proceed based off what happens here with this.
Yeah, I mean, it adds. I mean, if you take cannons now, like you have to rethink how you play them. You can't put them behind your lines anymore so much because, you know, they can't shoot over the top, right? They'll cop the cover.
-1, yeah.
Yeah, they cop the cover. So could you place them on the far flank sort of thing, or I don't know. It adds a level of, like, you have to think about it a bit more now. So I don't, you know, that could be a good thing. Doesn't help the complication, but you know, it does add more thinking, I guess, to how you play.
Yeah, your cannons have to be away from your own units, but it can stare
That's
into
right,
the forest.
you know, yeah, but far away from your flank, that if something takes them out in turns, they can't like eat your line in the next turn, you know, like, I don't know, or maybe you just don't take cannons anymore. I don't know. As a dwarf player, I don't love that change because I think the cannons are better than the bombards. But anyway, we'll save that for later.
Right. Okay, next is the army selection. Allies are now not recommended for competitive, so it's official that Mantic says allies are not recommended for competitive play. What do you guys think about that?
I used to use allies a reasonable amount, probably 30% of my lists. I'd run them. I'd be looking at changing, say, from undead to the herd or something along those lines, and I would start using some of the herd units to get used to using them. Yes, you can use them to cover up weaknesses, but they create a weakness in themselves in that you can't cast on them. You're not using the inspiring. So I think it balances out, but I'm easy not playing with them, but I don't see any problem personally. But I know a lot of people dislike them, so I'm fine either way.
Yeah, for myself.
Go Adam.
Everyone's going at the same time.
Whichever one.
I'll go first. Yeah, for allies, the thing is, I don't think balancing is done on the consideration that each of these armies can take allies. I think that's one of the big thing, and it's very hard to tweak it that way. And then, yeah, there's just too much to test if I have to test every armies with the consideration that, oh, what allies can I take with them? And the next thing is the allies the alignment system is very arbitrary, right? Good, neutral, evil. They're not balanced around anything. Once again, it's more for fluff purposes. And if you're neutral, you have access to the whole catalog, which is kind of advantageous to neutral armies. And some people even say evil armies because there are more evil armies than good armies. There's more evil in Pentateuch, so they do have access to a wider catalog. So I'm okay with them it being removed. I think I think overall it's a good change.
Yeah, I think just stating not recommended for competitive play is enough. Like, you're not removing it from the game. You're just stating Mantic's position on it, which I think is much better than what they did with Withdraw, where they say optional. This says not recommended for competitive. So they're taking a stance. They're saying, hey, you guys have the freedom to do what you want. We're giving you the power as a tournament organizer, but this, don't expect us to balance anything at this point. As somebody that's never played with allies, I think that I've never had an issue with anybody taking allies and playing them against me. But I do see that there's absolutely a trend when it comes to allies, and it varies based off of mainly the power level of different armies. So I would say this last edition, we saw a lot of Nightstalkers and a lot of Ogres as allies. And in my opinion, those were the top 2 armies this last edition.
But why wouldn't you just take Ogres or Nightstalkers in that case? As far
because
as I didn't find any real difference in power level playing someone with them or without them.
No. I don't think so either. But why not play him, Jeff? Because nobody wants to be a filthy Nightstalker player. I mean,
well, you won't be considered filthy now, will you?
No. They're
the
tame and easygoing Nightstalkers.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, with that, Yan, you'd like to add on?
Oh, look, yeah, I agree. Like, I've never taken allies. I don't really see the need to take allies. I don't know any sort of narrative players ever in playing Kings. Like, no one actually says, I'm going to run a narrative campaign and have a big storyline, and therefore I want to play allies. Like, that's never really a consideration, to be honest. So I don't really think there might be. And so it's good that I guess that's an option. But I think if you want to play like that, if you just want to have fun and have a bit of a narrative campaign with, allied factions, like, you don't even need the rules to do that. You just do it, right? Doesn't really matter. So yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of good that it's not recommended for competitive play. I believe it makes armies more interesting when you have an army and a unique army in itself, without having to take all the, whether
now that it's recommended units. Not to use it, I wouldn't use it. Put it that way. But I was never against using them, and I enjoyed using them.
Yeah, I think a lot of the worst sort of abusive allies have been sort of curbed as of last release anyway. The Elohi and all that kind of stuff, which was the classic self-inspiring ally.
Well, the Nightstalkers having Mind Thirst was the other big.
Mind Thirst.
They didn't suffer from that. The downside so much.
Butchers were popular allies at one point of time, until they had a waiver value and fury. Butchers,
Butchers.
Because they have Mind Thirst, so it doesn't matter that you don't bring an inspiring source.
So there are some problems there.
Yeah. And thinking back to the very beginning of 2nd edition, allies used to be very broken because you could take magic items with allies at that point. And there weren't limitations on living legends with allies. So it's come a long ways, and I think they balance allies very fairly in general, to where I think that you could leave allies in for competitive play and you're not going to see, I would say you see maybe 5 to 10% of the field actually taking allies.
Yeah, it's very rare these days.
Yeah.
I think there was a Masters a few years ago where the Ogre package was quite popular. I think 2 Siege Breaker Hordes and 1 Flag Bearer was just the right pointage for 2,300 points worth of allies.
Yep. It absolutely was. But look at the results from those players and you'll be like, let them have it. So.
Yeah, it didn't make any difference. That's what I was saying.
Right.
I don't think it was any big power play in it.
Yeah.
It was just another option. That's all.
Right. All right. So let's move on to magical items. I shall read off all the magical items and then we shall discuss. So first is Banner of Abbetshire. That's the spell word aura item is now gone. Maqua's Potion of the Caterpillar. He has gone out of business. No more Potion of the Caterpillar. No more Pathfinder item. Jesse's Boots of Striding gain the Pathfinder on top of Strider for 1 turn. Wine of Elvenkind has dropped in 5 points from 40 to 35. And that's all because Tome of Darkness not changed. So Spellward, I guess, I'm not sure about Spellward. Potion of the Caterpillar.
Purely a Nightstalker nerf, that one, I think.
Well, Adam
Abbetshire, no. They still, you still get the spell ward.
The
aura got removed too.
Yeah, I know the aura got removed, but
there's
the banner of Abbetshire, I don't think it made a huge difference in games personally. People would just pick a different target and shoot them with the bolts or whatever. But that's my own personal view.
All right.
I tried it out a few times, made a little bit of a difference, but not much.
It used to cost how much? 20 points?
20, yeah, it was cheap.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with 20 points, right? Well, one thing you don't get to do now is to buy Potion of the Caterpillar. So what do you guys think of that?
Oh, yeah, that's massive. Not that I hardly ever used it. But
I agree. The Potion of the Caterpillar is big. At least in the U.S., going back to the banner of the Abbetshire, in kind of the top U.S. scene, having Spellward Aura was a very big thing in, I would say, the top echelons of the competitive play, whether it was through the Nightstalkers or getting Banner of the Abbetshire. Specifically having the combination of Stealthy and Spellward, which it turns out Nightstalkers had plenty of, and then Ogres could do very easily as well with their Boomer Chariots and then Banner of the Abbetshire. I think that really showed the power level when you combine both of them. So I think Banner of the Abbetshire being removed is going to be a big deal for certain army builds that we're trying to combine them in that way.
Yeah, we didn't see much of it here in Australia.
Right.
With the combos.
So,
well, Jeff, you could have started it.
I could have, but I wasn't. You know what I'm like. I hardly use any magic items at all.
I mean, I would argue as well, Jeff. I'm not sure whether you agree, but like, I think the Australian scene is a lot more mellow. It's there's less min-maxing in that sort of regard. Less spam, less lightning bolt spam, that sort of thing. So probably why we didn't see it, but I can see the justification why they removed it.
Oh, it definitely had its uses, but I mean, when I came up against it, as I said, I would. Obviously, they're trying to protect certain units that are more vulnerable to, say, lightning bolts, etc. But I wouldn't have found it much of a difference because I hardly ever use it, and I hardly ever use Potion of the Caterpillar where other people would never go without it.
Yeah, but Jeff is more of a counter-punch player, so if you absorb the punches first.
I've always gone for units over items, so yeah.
So what do you guys think, Yen and Adam?
For Caterpillar? Yeah, look, I think it's a good change. I think it was just a bit too ubiquitous. Like everyone took it, both of them usually. And so I think it's good that it's just the one now. As a herd player, I think it's nice because it makes my army somewhat unique. And previously, I think one of the challenges with herd was that we're kind of like a bag of hammers. Like everything had Pathfinder Thunderous, which is nice, but you don't need it on everything, right? Like you didn't really have the you don't always need it on your big block at infantry, for example, and other people didn't. They'll plonk their defense 5 horde in a forest, and then that will be a nice defensive horde. And so, I don't think, I feel like Pathfinder and having Pathfinder just on the units that hit hard, was enough. And I didn't think the herd really had that sort of advantage. But yeah, I think it's good that they you remove that item. I think it levels the playing field.
Is it a stealth buff to all Pathfinder armies?
Oh, definitely. Not a major buff, but it is a buff.
It
makes
is a buff.
You look at your list now and say, well, what has Pathfinder? If you're that type of player, okay, well, I need some of those units to deal with the forests, etc. Whereas before they just go, okay, I'll put on the Potion of Caterpillar. So,
I think before this change, you have Potion of the Caterpillar and you have Boots of Striding. And usually you only need to deal with 2 difficult areas on the map, and then you just have the 2 answers to it. And then it doesn't matter that the rest of your army doesn't have Pathfinder. But now that you only have access to 1, I think it makes more tactical depth. Yeah. Wine of Elvenkind, does anyone use that item at all?
No.
Nope. I think it needed to go down another 5 or 10 points before you would see it still. Especially if you're removing withdraw from your game. Why do you need Wine of Elvenkind anymore?
That's what I was thinking why they did it.
I agree. I think without the withdraw rule, like that expensive item becomes even less viable, I think. But yeah. Yeah, I never take it normally anyway, but
Yeah.
Imagine having
Patrick
two
Zorro
point
Allen
costs.
used it quite a bit, didn't he, in Undead with his Soul Reaver Cav?
Also, that Pat Zorella?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was used to use it all the time with his Soul Reaver Cav, and was well known for how well he used it.
It was
Yeah.
very early on in second edition that he used that effectively. I got the I felt the pain of it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it's
he's
to
a great
dodge
player.
intervening units to charge the thing behind, especially when they're quite widely spaced. I think that's it. But if you're used to the geometry, you could tighten up your ranks a little bit more, and he would not be able to charge if he couldn't fit. Yep. Imagine having 2 point costs if there's withdraw and no withdraw. That would be weird.
Yeah.
So my hot take here is I think that the magic artifact changes are actually the biggest change to the general meta, especially Banner of the Abbetshire and Potion of the Caterpillar. I think the army changes in certain armies are enough to see them go up or down in play, but I think those two artifact changes are going to kind of change the way lists are built and kind of show us different armies coming to the top or falling lower.
That's a good point you made there, because magical artifacts are taken and affects all armies, so it is a big change. All right, moving on. Host Shadowbeast is the only spell that kind of changed. It is quite different from what it used to be. It will give you a set number of extra attacks, sort of like more pups. And the number of attacks you get is based on the caster level +2. So I found that a little bit strange. It's not based on the spell level, but the caster level. So that you can have a level 3 spellcaster casting a level 1 version of the spell, and that means it only rolls 2 dice. But if it goes off, they'll get level 3 +2, 5 extra attacks, hitting on 3+, crushing strength 3, and this number of attacks will never increase, get multiplied by flanks or whatnot, or duelist or whatnot. So I think overall that's a good change. And one extra thing is that it could be cast on self when you're in combat. So another interesting question is that does that mean combat casters will go up in power level? And then the other question is, what if the self is not an individual? Can I still cast it on myself? So if I'm a vampire on
yes,
dragon,
you can.
Right. But since it's a fixed number of attacks, I don't think that's a big issue.
No. I tried it out in a game the other day, and I didn't find it that, it's definitely not game breaking by any means. So it's a nice little touch there, but nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I think some of the main uses you could see from it is defending against flyers. So that little lonely spellcaster in the back there now has the ability to go knock a flyer out of the air, a dragon that jumped over or whatnot.
Would he still be limited by his movement? So he can't charge more than, say, speed 5 and cast the thing, can he?
Yeah, be on a horse, I guess, but horses are expensive.
Yeah, well,
so the way it's worded, though, is that it says you are allowed to cast while in close combat when you charge. So my understanding
does it say when you
that,
charge? Because I didn't see that in there.
That's
what had me wondering about it. If you could, then definitely better. But
because like the Riftforged Orcs, the little hero, the 75 pointer. He's the classic one, right? Who charges in and just casts it himself.
Yep.
Actually, I'm not sure if it does bypass the double caveat.
Yeah, that's so. I don't know the answer. I just wondered with that. I played it as if you couldn't do it unless you did your normal restrictions to magic, which is to move.
Okay, so on the Host Shadowbeast wording itself, it says a spellcaster may cast Host Shadowbeast onto themselves and can do so even when engaged with an enemy unit, while the general general restrictions of spellcasting is that you can't do it when you charge or move at the double. So I think this requires a clarification. I would think Mantic would want it to be able to cast, as it would be a bit silly if you charge and you can't cast it on yourself to buff it.
Well,
Especially if that was the
it's going
intent.
off. Yeah.
You only have a 5-inch charge range then if you want to cast it on yourself.
That's what I'm saying.
That would limit it severely and make it unplayable, in my opinion. So,
yeah. Oh well, I think we can't discuss this any further, except that it does require clarification. I do think that most likely they would like to allow that you can charge and cast it on yourself. All right.
I hope so.
Yeah, I'd definitely make it better, and that would be a great use, Adam, if you did have those casters in the backfield and being able to pin down a flyer. Would be perfect. Especially things like the Trident Realms who have their characters with speed 6 and wild charge D3.
Yeah, they're fighty as well, right? So they'd be like the mythic will become 8 attacks or whatever else. Yeah,
they're going to be a real threat.
Absolutely.
Oh, I think you could. So I'm looking at the rules, how they interact. It says that spells work the same way as ranged attacks, and in ranged attacks you can't do when you move at the double. It didn't say you can't do when you charge, but then
charge.
Okay, right. So
but because there's an extra qualifier that if you're engaged you can't shoot. So now for Shadowbeast say you when you're engaged you can.
Okay, good. Oh, I'm glad that's clarified.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure.
I think it's a very playable spell then.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see it in every army. It's not overpower good, but I think in the right matchups or with the right ideas, it can definitely add enough to swing a combat. I would say it's slightly more effective than just like a Bane Chant on a normal unit, because like a infantry horde or a unit with 18 attacks, 18 to 20 attacks, usually you're only getting 1 or 2 more wounds out of a Bane Chant.
You get an average of 2 with a Bane Chant, and this I think you're looking at 1. Well, if you're getting 3 extra attacks, maybe if you're going up to the 4, you might get more than that. But I think anything that's just adding 3 attacks, you're only getting 2 hits, so it's under 2. So it's a little bit less effective.
I'm thinking if you get 4 or 5 extra
4 or 5, then you tip it in its favor.
Yeah, the thing about it is you normally you can only cast it on individuals, and individuals will have very little number of attacks, so it would have a stronger effect on Bane Chant, because on Bane Chant you only get a +2 wounds only on 18 attacks. So Bane Chant is beneficial on things with lots of attacks, but you're looking at full Shadowbeast being cast on individuals, or self if the monster happens to be a caster. That would usually be your lord on a big mount. So they would usually probably have somewhere between 7 to 10 attacks. So post Shadowbeast 5 would be really a good power increase for them.
Definitely on that, yeah. But I thought Adam meant, would I rather put my spellcaster into combat casting that, or would I rather Bane Chant the unit?
Right.
And which would be
I'm just kind of trying to equate the two as far as power level goes and how many extra wounds you get out of a combat. So,
All right. With that, next few changes, I'll just kind of skim through them. When you're so there are more instances of redeployment rules. So this is just codifying in game scenarios that if both players have units with redeployment capabilities, you roll off and take turns redeploying them. And then there are new siege rules and Kings of War ambush rules and legendary game rules. So siege and legendary is kind of fun, but I think the one that's gotten most people's attention is Kings of War ambush. Some of my local players are kind of excited to play that, especially newer players or even players that haven't been playing for a long time. I think it's something fresh and interesting to get into without too much commitment. So I think ambush is really a good good addition to the game. In terms of the balance, I'm not too sure about that. I would lean towards that the game is not very balanced. So, but if you're not caring that much about balance and you're just wanting short casual games, it is great. Balance, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that, in my opinion anyway, balance isn't necessarily an issue with Ambush. I think that you're going to see Ambush in a lot of thematical or slow grow type league games. So, if you have competitive players in there, you already know that they're competitive in your local group. But I think the main attraction is that it's going to get people to put models on the board, with very little commitment, and get new players to roll some dice, see if they like the game. And then if they want a balanced or more competitive, then you're like, well, the Kings of War, the main rules is where you want to lead them at that point.
Yeah, I think overall it's great.
Yeah, I think that this, I think everyone got hung up a little bit about all the minor changes and things like that. But I think these three sort of new play styles, is one of the big, the not biggest changes in the book in terms of adding to the game. Look, to be honest, I'm not sure how much of the Siege and Legendary games I will play. First, because getting the terrain and the castles and things like that, I'm not sure whether I would probably invest in that myself. And Legendary games is, with young family, it's hard enough getting a 2-hour game in, compared, what more like a 4-hour game, when it's huge, that sort of thing. But look, I think they're great additions, and I think a lot of people are interested in that sort of stuff. I think when we were playtesting Ambush, I think it was a really fun addition. I really enjoyed the 1,000-point quick games. They were super fun, I thought. Quick and dirty type sort of 1,000 point sort of games. Refreshing, yeah. You played a bit differently.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job sort of clarifying things about the board size and being aware of Pathfinder dominating games, so therefore have more walls, have more terrain, because the shooting is really, probably a little bit unbalanced in the smaller size games. I think they did a good job with it, and I think it's a great addition. I think if there's a few people keen on running sort of like mixed events, so you have a 1-dayer and you play 2 1,000-point games and 2 2,000-point games, so you get 4 games in a day, rather than the 3. I think it's good fun. I think they did a good job with it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Ambush is the standout of the 3, because actually, if I want to play games with castles or huge games, I can easily, if I'm at that stage, I will be able to easily tweak my own rules for that. But Ambush is a little more official, especially when you're trying to play small games, and at least a balance, some effort to keep things not out of control. So yeah, I like that addition, except for some of my units are already based in hordes and I can't break it in the regiment.
Yeah. My armies are not modeled for Ambush actually at the moment, so I need to do a bit of work to play it.
All right, kudos to Mantic for Ambush. So next, we are moving on to the army lists themselves.
If you're from the Asia Pacific region, do consider checking out Hammer House website for your hobby needs. They carry a wide range of miniatures and hobby supplies, including Mantic, Vallejo, Scale 75, and Green Stuff World products.
And first up, we have the Abyssal Dwarves. Anyone play Abyssal Dwarves? I guess not. So I shall take this one.
Yeah, you can take a page.
Berserkers, they have a new option for Slaver Nets, which gives them ensnare, but only against infantry and heavy infantry. I think that's kind of crap. If you like to give them ensnare, just give it to them without any what do you call it, qualifiers.
Caveats.
Just say nets, right?
They're defense 3. Give them a break, please. Give them just straight up ensnare.
Yeah. So next is Abyssal Half-Breeds. They got a 5-point discount in the regiment and troop size. I think they're still not enough to be played, because the biggest problem with them is that they're defense 4, 14, 16 on regiment size. They die a little too easily. So even with that 5-point discount, and they gave Fury, I think, in the past few changes, which is still not really enough.
I've shined to them a little bit more lately. Played against them and played with them once or twice, and they're definitely better than what they used to be.
Yeah, I think it does help. They're at 195 for the regiment. They're inching towards the cheaper cavalry pricing.
Yeah.
So you might be able to accept that their defense fall based on their pricing, and because you can field more stuff.
Yeah.
All right, most of the war engines, the rules is just that instead of ignores covered, they get ignore obscured. Halfling comes with 2 extra options now. They are all exclusive to each other because they are all limited upgrade. One is the Supreme Taskmaster, which gains Aura Brutal to Slave only and Rally 2 to Slave only for 25 points. The other one is called the Abomination Ironcaster Overseer bracket name TBD. Bracket 1.
Love
Gains
it.
Aura Life Leech 1+1 to Abomination only for 15 points. So one of it obviously has a bit of a typo. They forgot to add a new name or modify the name. And for the Supreme Taskmaster, I think it's a little fluffy. I'm not sure if it's a competitive choice because I don't think the slave build is popular as of currently, and I don't think this will help it much. I think one of the key problems with the Halfling is that it is quite expensive for its own profile. I don't know if it's worthwhile. They did reduce the cost in the last Clash change, but I don't think it's still a popular option. And then all these upgrades do cost more. And giving Life Leech 1 to Abomination, I don't think it's very useful because that's not what they really need. The problem with Abomination, and I'm looking at most likely, if you look at the half-breeds, they are Abominations, but Life Leech 1 is not something that they really need. They need something that would survive the initial hit, not to help them gain wounds back.
The grotesques, maybe?
For the grotesque,
Yeah, grotesque, yeah.
They hang around a bit, so they might get a bit of value out of it. You still wouldn't buying it just to do that.
But grotesque themselves, they are not that popular because they hit on 4s, right? So that's the big thing about grotesque. And when I look at them, I'm like, why don't I just take the lower obsidian golems instead? They are defense 6. They also hit on 4s, crush 2.
Yeah, grotesque are much faster though.
They are a good unit.
Yeah.
Also,
Hey,
the
AG.
Crush 1 Thunder
Plays a lot of
2 is it's pretty nasty.
Add in your vicious. Yeah, I think they got brutal as well, don't they?
Yeah,
they
they got
they
brutal
got
as well.
brutal.
And it's 16, 18, they're solid.
Yeah, very solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, but would you take a Halfling just to give it?
That's what I said. You wouldn't take the
Halfling.
Yeah,
just
probably
No.
Probably not. But,
No.
but I mean, it makes the
know-
army pretty grindy, I guess. I mean, you at the most, you probably fit 2 hordes on the other side, maybe 3 if you're putting the Halfling behind. But
and then you're positioning units just to get that unit into position. It throws the whole thing.
just for Life Leech 1, it's probably not worth it.
No, you wouldn't be doing it.
You know what I think you could see though? I actually think the Supreme Taskmaster option for Brutal and Rally 2 for slaves can be quite good. Specifically in a slave orc gore rider type list. So it's not the infantry, but take the gore riders. You bump them up to a respectable nerve.
Yeah.
Bump them up to a respectable nerve of 14-16 for 135 points. And they have Crush 1, Thunder 1.
Yeah, that was their problem before, was their nerves. So yes, that would definitely work.
Oh, that for 280 points healthy.
Well,
I mean, you're saving so many points on those gore riders that you can afford a Hellfade. So but I mean, that wouldn't be necessarily all your options. Obviously the Hellfang can only cover so many units. But I think that's actually a very good detachment that I expect to see at some point on the table.
The Taskmaster upgrade is definitely more interesting than the Abomination upgrade.
Yep.
All right.
Is the Rampage new on the Hellfane? Or is that came in last
I think it came in
No,
last
it came in.
last clash.
book? Yeah, last
And,
clash.
and that's the other thing. The Hellfane by itself is actually a very respectable unit for the points that it is. I mean, hitting on 3s with 9 attacks base and then Rampage D6, Crush 2, Thunder 2, Vicious, Strider, and
Yeah.
it gives Aura Brutal to Dwarves just flat out, which then itself has Brutal. I mean, it's actually a really good piece, for 265 points. By itself, I could see people taking it without any of the Living Legend upgrades. I think the Living Legend upgrades allow you to then just more theme your list around it. But I think the Hellfane is what makes Abyssal Dwarves unique, and I'd be sad not to see that play more.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but like you could run. There's a lot of look. There's probably maybe too many auras into the Abyssal Dwarves. They're almost like halflings in a way now. Like you could run a dwarf infantry list and then have the Hellfane giving an aura. I think then the formation gives an aura. Then you got, I think, Inferno gives an aura. So you have infantry that's like brutal, wild charge, elite, and something else maybe, all given via auras. And I kind of look at that being a dwarf player and a dwarf player who wants to play dwarf infantry, and kind of go like, oh, that's kind of tasty, right? You might be possibly a viable dwarf infantry sort of list in there. Whether or not you get all your auras into play at one go, I don't know, but yeah, there might be something there, because you don't really see Abyssal dwarves very much, do you? Apart from the decimators.
See, guys, that wasn't in when I was playing them, but you could, if you wanted to go down that route, you could get 2 of them if you wanted to spread the auras out and bigger and get different aura for different parts of the army. So, as Adam said, it's a decent fighter. So,
and I mean, it's a unit strength. I mean, that's one of the big key factors when I look at building an army. Is it could be expensive, but if it's unit strength, it's going to help me win games. So,
yeah,
right.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, I guess Abyssal Dwarves have fallen off the radar ever since War Engines.
The heavy mortar got nerfed, which is kind of weird.
And the heavy mortar got nerfed to.
It's not that nerfed. It's still
not
scary.
That nerfed. I would argue the Ignor's cover change was a bigger hit to them, and it's the common build was War Engines and rocks, right, in the golems, and because the other options tend to be a little subpar, but I think they are kind of inching their way back, so we'll see whether these changes are enough. You'd like to say something, Adam?
Oh, I was just looking at the heavy mortar. I thought that it got reverted back. It's always been D3 plus 2, even after it got reduced down to piercing 2, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Never mind then.
Yeah. The strong part of the mortar was always the +2, D3 +2, so it always multiplies into a lot of hits, because even if you roll 1, it's still 3. So moving on.
Vicious. Yeah, they're still good.
Next is the Ratkin Slaves. They have a total of no changes. They actually have 1 change. They don't even have the faction portrait. At the start of every faction, there's a picture of the faction. So looks like they're trying to fit everything in 2 pages. So I don't think they are gonna stay for 4th edition, but we'll see. I shall just quietly move on.
Technically, the rocket launcher changed because they could take the rocket launcher from their big brother Abyssal Dwarf army, but nothing that's unique to them changed.
Well, the rocket launcher didn't really change. It's just a change of the Ignore cover wording.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, they weren't allowed to take it before. Is that right? Or
no,
they've always been allowed to take it, but that's the only war machine that they've had access to.
Yeah.
Rather, yep.
Effectively no change, I'd say. Right. So
Yes.
next we have Basileans. Their one and only war engine, the Heavy Arbalest, got buffed in the sense that they lost. They are 5 or 10 points cheaper. I think they're supposed to be 10 points cheaper, and they gain Shattering. So I think that's a good change. They are now coming in fairly cheaply at 75 points. Shattering is nice. Basileans never had very strong shooting, but with the Gladestalker nerf that the Sisterhood Scouts avoided, I think the Sisterhood Scouts are looking kind of attractive now, especially compared next to Gladestalkers. They are 160 points. Ranged 4 class with Vicious Range, which mathematically should work the same as Elite. Just that their melee combat is not as good. They do have Iron Resolve to be able to survive cheap shooting. So yeah, I think that would allow Basileans to have a smattering of shooting in the form of Scouts, maybe a Lightning Bolt Wizard, although the Boomstick has been slightly nerfed since last edition, and you can throw in a Arbalest or 2 to add some wounds and especially Shattering, which is equivalent to a +1 wound. So I think that's a nice change to give Basileans a little bit more shooting options. I'll do the Phoenix last. The Paladin Knights received a 5-point discount in both the Regiment and Horde options. That's great because the Knights are pretty popular, especially with that synergy with Divine Fervor from Angels, giving them Elite. So the Knights have always been a popular choice, so that is a straight up buff for them, although it's just 5-point discount. And lastly is the Phoenix. I like that it's cheaper and it has a cheaper basic profile, 145 points. And where is it? Oh, there it is, 145 points. Comes with Heal 5 and an 18-inch attack now. So that means if you take the Phoenix, you do have a more reliable shooting platform as well, because 18-inch 10 attacks, 80 aim, 4+. It has Heal 5, but the basic profile no longer comes with Radiance of Life. And if you like to take Radiance of Life, it's a 30-point upgrade. But this second part of the upgrade is a little bit strange because you lower him to defense 2 and you lose Nimble, but you gain regeneration 3+. So I don't know if I like that trade-off of defense 2 for regen 3+, because if you get one-shotted off the board, then it doesn't matter how good your regeneration is. Other basic changes to the profile, it dropped from speed 10 to speed 8. It dropped from 5 attacks to 3 attacks. That's in line with its cheaper point cost. I'm not sure if the nerf has changed. I think it's
gone up one, I think.
It's gone up one?
Yeah, it's gone up.
Looks like it.
Yeah, it's a 16-18 now.
Yeah.
Actually, it might have gone up 2. I think it was a 14-16.
Yeah, I think it was 14-16. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I haven't got the old book, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Do you like that upgrade that lowers the defense for regen 3?
Well, one other thing that we didn't mention, Paige, was that not only do they gain Radiance of Life, but they also gain Cloak of Death in that same upgrade.
Yeah. My only problem with that, and I agree, Cloak of Death's fantastic, but if you're speed 8 and you lose Nimble, he's not going to be jumping around as well as he could to make it as effective as say other ones that can use that type of combination. And on top of that, with that defense too, you'd just pour everything into it, wouldn't you? Just knock it off.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could work, but against non-shooty armies, it'll be good.
Yeah. I like the regular. I'm not convinced with the ancient.
Great.
Yeah, regular's great at 145 points, but I think losing Nimble is huge for that price tag. And then, as you say, defense 2, look, obviously it comes down to the play, but then if you're hiding it from Gladestalkers all game, then you're not really getting to use his Radiance or his Cloak of Death, are you? So
use it at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the upgrade.
So you can't hide behind too many things either.
That's right.
I played against a list with 4 of the regiments of the Sisterhood Archers, and 2 of the Phoenix, and the firepower they spat out was pretty effective. I can tell you, I wore a lot of wounds on the way in. So the shooting from the Phoenix is quite good with steady aim, height 6, just sees over everything, can move and shoot. It's got good long distance, and you add that in with all the other shooting that you're talking about, Paige, and you've got a
decent amount of
very
shooting,
effective shooting with
Yep.
the option of hurling. Sorry.
Yeah, with the scouts, the Arbalest, Lightning Bolt, and the
Yep.
Phoenix now having an
Yeah.
18-inch range, that does give it a more credible shooting threat, and I think overall it's
Very
great. It also differentiates it from Samacris, right, which used to be flat out better than the Phoenix.
Yeah.
I do like that Cloak of
I-
Death because, you know, when you charge things with 18 attacks, that 1 or 2 extra pip of damage does swing the math better in your favor. So I might
It's fantastic.
that.
Cloak of Death.
It is actually really big because Basilea has a lot of dread in the army as well. So Cloak of Death plus dread or brutal from their large infantry. That -2 just flat is going to be pretty big. So, but I think that you're going to see more of the base versions, mainly because you still take Samacris in my mind, who has Radiance of Life built in. And typically 2 Radiance of Lives aren't needed in the army. So
I would think it's either or right now. If I were to take, I think if I take both the Phoenix and Samacris, it's a lot of points in support.
I think the Phoenix is cheap enough though.
Right.
And I think
that's true.
I
The
think
base Phoenix.
one of the big things this Phoenix is going to be able to do that maybe people find out in playtesting is that it's a height 6, speed 8, nimble monster that can just go out and charge things that you don't want to deal with. And that 16-18 nerve with the regen 4 up, it's likely going to stick around for more than 1, potentially 2 turns.
Yeah, there's
you
the risk
charge
that
a
if you
dragon with it and hold for a turn and then just walk off. You've still done what you needed to do, which is shut it down.
Absolutely.
with regen 3, it can heal off quite a bit of the damage and take another charge.
You're
Interesting.
only risking 145 points. It's not like
I think it's all buffs for Basilea here. I think the army was already good before, and they just got better because they have more tools to use now.
Yeah. All right. I think we should quickly move on to Audio of the Brothermark. The one change is the 5-point discount to Order of the Abyssal Hunt, which I think is great because those guys are being used often anyway. And Brothermark has received a lot of buffs since the last Clash. I do think their power level is at a comfortable level right now. And not a lot of people play them still, but I don't think it's a handicap if you play with them. So all in all, Brothermark is also in a good place. So in the interest of time, I think we'll skip forward to next, which is the Dwarves. Ian, could you cover the changes to the Dwarves?
Sure. I think the only changes to the Dwarves is just to the changes obviously to the artillery ignores cover rule. So now you've got the options between the cannon and the bombard, with the cannon ignores concealed and the bombard ignores obscured. Personally, my opinion is that I don't love the bombard, mainly because the ignore obscured option is just piercing 1, which is, on 2/5+ dice, I just don't think it's really worth it, to be honest. And then the other shorter range attack is cops all the penalty. So, look, and then the cannon now ignores concealed. So I used to play cannons, obviously, just like rock throwers, just put them behind your lines. And with dwarves, I think they do need to be behind the lines because they're so slow. It's just hard to respond to things that sort of go wide on you. And now you can't do that. So I'm not sure. I feel like this is a nerf to the dwarf artillery if you want to take that form of artillery and you're not taking organ guns, for example. So that, I don't love the change to the cannons, but it is what it is, and maybe people didn't really take that many cannons anyway. I think organ guns were a bit more popular. But I think the biggest change to the list is the Dwarf Lord and Beast, getting to be 25 points cheaper. I think he desperately needed that points drop, comparing him to the Lord and Frostfang, who was just flat out better. Is he like a triple selection? Like, are you going to see 3 of him? I'm not sure still if you would see 3 of him. But I think he's a lot more viable now. I think you definitely see at least 1, maybe a couple in most lists in there. Yeah.
I think with units available to him like Faber and Ironheart and Garrick Heavy Hand, I don't think you'll see 3, but I would expect to see 1 in a lot of dwarf lists.
Yeah, like a nimble scoring defense 6 unit in a dwarf army is always going to be handy. It's always going to be helpful for an army that doesn't really get to move very much. So I think you definitely see him. And I think it's a well-needed points drop. Yeah, but definitely not, I think, at the level of the Frostfang Lords with their 9 attacks.
All right. Wow.
Jealousy there.
Is Ignore
yeah, totally.
is Ignore Concealed worse than Ignore Obscured in general terms?
I think
Yes.
so, in the context of how war machines are used, because you put them behind your line to protect them. It's harder to get to them when they're on the back lines. If you're far out on a flank, for example, if someone has enough drops to dedicate a 1 unit to take them out, and suddenly you're dealing with a unit turning on your flank, right? Yeah, I just think it's harder to use. But
looks like it's enough to the cannon.
Sorry, I want to maybe take a step back here with Ignore Concealed. If a unit is within a forest and the majority of their front arc is within the forest, so their front of their base is not sticking out of the forest, that unit is then concealed and obscured. Correct?
I am flipping through it. I don't think so. I will come back to.
Sorry, so you're saying the
-2?
No.
in the forest.
I mean, you can only be -1
One
total.
or the
But
other.
I'm
Yeah,
saying,
okay, I get you.
but I'm thinking if a cannon can shoot a unit that is 50% within a piece of terrain, their Ignore Conceals is ignoring the 50% within terrain. But if they are still 50% of that front arc behind the height 9 forest or height 6 forest, even though they are within it, they would still get cover because you're not ignoring obscure, because that forest is still within the line you would have to draw to target the unit.
Okay.
Oh, you're right.
Am I understanding
Obscure
that
target
correct?
if at least half the line of sight passes over intervening units or terrain, including difficult terrain the target is in contact with, it is considered obscured. So yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Ignore Concealed is garbage. I'm sorry, but it is just, it's absolutely, you'll never see a cannon again.
I think this is unintended.
Yeah,
potentially. But
so it needs some
but
cleanup.
the way, again, we talked about it, but I think that they overcomplicated something that didn't need to get this far in depth. So
you heard it here, guys. Ignore Concealed is garbage because if its frontage is in the terrain, it's still obscured by the intervening trees. Oh well. Dwarf Lord of Large Beast is cheaper. I thought it was pretty good before. I always thought it's a great mobile anvil and a speed threat in an army that doesn't have much speed, and it just got better. So awesome.
absolutely.
With that, let's move on to the free dwarfs. Ian, take it away with no change.
Yeah, so I think the free dwarfs are just the same. They get access to all the same changes in terms of the bombard and the cannons, and then the free dwarf lord on large beasts. So same thing. So I don't think there's any difference between the two factions there. The changes that affected the main list affects the free dwarves as well.
That would probably mean the free dwarves won't be taken more than it currently is. So that means
yeah, I don't know how
Imperial dwarves are
popular
still
the free dwarves are in the US, Adam, but they're definitely not. I don't think they're as popular as the Imperials here. Especially with the rise of the formation in the Imperials.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it's
very
the same
popular.
here.
And I find free dwarves, I've played them a fair bit this year with not huge amounts of success, I would say. Just based on my collection, I would like to run them, but they feel like a herd that is slower and hits less reliably and less hard. But they get access to shooting, sort of thing. Yeah. So I think they're kind of struggling a little bit already with the free dwarves. Again, the free dwarf on the Lord on Beast change is great. I think that's a great change for them. But I don't think the changes are gonna make a big difference in their sort of popularity or power level, to be honest. But
we got to talk about the shadow buffs though, which is no more Pathfinder item means that free dwarf Brock Riders are superior to Imperial dwarf Brock Riders.
That is true. But I think I do like them still. I like the Brock Rider troops, especially. I think they're a great unit. I actually think ambush, free dwarf ambush is actually very good because you can get lots of Pathfinder on your units, which controls, and because of the smaller board size, your dwarf army doesn't struggle with getting outflanked as much anymore, and your Brock troops actually can control the whole board. Plus your unlocking ranger regiments, that hybrid unit that can fight and shoot is, I think, again, very good in ambush. So I think they're a bit of a sleeper unit for the sleeper faction for that smaller game, to be honest.
Theory crafting for ambush.
Yeah, so
giving the ambush.
I think they're actually very good in the ambush size, mainly because they don't have to worry about getting outflanked as much in that smaller game board size. For both, I think both dwarf factions will excel in that smaller size because of the smaller board. But yeah.
Okay, with that, elves, and now let Adam take this one.
All right. So elves got quite a few changes here. So the first thing is Gladestalkers are now 10 points more expensive, bumps them up to 185, I believe, for the regiment. Stormwind Cavalry got a 5-point discount in both the troop and regiment format. Silverbreeze Cav got a discount of 15 points at the troop and 20 points at a regiment. The Ward Chariots got discounted in each of theirs, 5, 15, 20, and 20 in each troop, regiment, horde, legion, respectively. Bolt Throwers got a 10-point discount, and now they apply Spell Ward to the unit after they deal damage to that unit. Elf and Archmages did not change, and the Noble on War Chariots is now Crush 1, Thunder 1 instead of just Thunder 2.
He got an additional attack as well, didn't he? From 3 to 4.
No, they've always had 4 attacks.
They always had 4.
They always had 4, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's always been borderline. I think the big, I like that change. I think the big thing for him is he needed like a 5 or 10 point increase, and you needed to get inspiring on this guy. His lack of inspiring in the elf army, who already struggles unlocking characters, it's really tough to justify taking a Noble on War Chariot, especially over a troop of Silverbreeze now that they're even cheaper.
So he did get 4 attack, an extra attack. So Easy Armies has him as 3 attacks. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I thought he always had 4.
No.
Oops.
So he's worse than what
lack
you
of
remember.
inspiring is the big thing for him.
Yeah. So as elf players, my first army in Kings of War was Elves, and the main thing I was known for was the bringing Silver Breeze to their glory. So they got nerfed in previous after that. But I ran a spam of Silver Breeze, so now seeing that they dropped significantly in points just gives me all those dirty ideas as an Elf player.
Come back.
Yeah, looking at it, right, because of the increase in price of Gladestalkers to 185 and the reduce in price of Silver Breeze, they are now cheaper than Gladestalkers. They are 180 points and with 2 extra attacks. So I think they are quite worth taking and looking at. Does that edge Gladestalkers out? Would you stop taking Gladestalkers?
I never took Gladestalkers, but I would say no. The big thing Gladestalkers have going for them is they unlock and their unit strength 3 versus the Silver Breeze regiment's only unit strength 2.
24 inches as well is a big difference in shooting.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, the Gladestalkers, even with less attacks, they're more potent in combat because they just have flat elite. Unfortunately, the big change I want to see is Silver Breeze Cav getting flat elite, but that seems not to be the case. So,
I mean, I do think the move from 130 points to 115 for the troop as well. That I think now they can chaff as well. 130 always seemed a bit expensive to chaff, but 115 now seems not too bad. You
They
know, I
often
think
used them as chaff, didn't they? So, what about the bolt thrower change, Adam? Would that make much difference?
I think it does. 10 points cheaper and getting an additional special rule. I think just meta talking at this point, you're going to see greater air elementals all over the place. It's going to be windy at the top tables. So I think if you can get some cheeky spell wards plucked onto those guys who want to get surged the next turn, you can make those more reliable 2 to 3 inch surges a little bit less gimmies.
True.
You know, so I'm hoping that it'll make a difference, but I have yet to actually put elves on the table and practice them. So it's all theory at this point.
Yep.
I think that Spellcraft book is very nice. It's very fun, full of flavor without adding extra rules. So I really like that change, and you can do fun stuff like shooting a unit that's about to charge you and hope that they fail their enchant. So that's an interesting option as well.
Also, you can shoot a unit that you know you're not going to kill and reduce the effectiveness of a healing spell against them on the following turns.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, with that, I think we're all done with elves. We'll move on to the Sylvan Kin, which the only real change is that the Windborn are cheaper because the rest of the changes are kind of inherited from the elves, although their Gladestalkers are slightly different in flavor. So what do you think of that, Adam?
Windborn were my babies. They made the Windborn for me, and I love them. So the ability to have your shooting attacks be a wind blast that deals damage is extremely good, especially with the lack of spell ward that we're about to see in this next edition. So you're always going to be hitting on 4s, except for when you're targeting halflings. So I think it's huge, and a 30-point decrease is amazing for this unit in an already amazing faction that has access to greater air elementals and still really good Gladestalkers that are stealthy. So in my opinion, they're going to be probably the best Gladestalkers because one of the big counters is the mirror match shooting. So if you can have stealthy Gladestalkers and greater air elementals, and now a really cheap Windborn unit, you have a lot of tools as a Sylvan Kin player. And I am not that filthy of a person that I'm going to pick this army up. So I will revert myself to maybe playing the lesser regular elves.
Lesser elves.
Are they lesser though? I mean, I think they are both.
They are lesser.
I think
I'm
they're both
sorry,
in a
but
great spot.
Drakons don't hold up to greater air elementals.
Mm.
Might be a hot take, but
I mean, Sylvan Kin and Cav also get that, Pathfinder sort of that you can buy for cheap as well. And I believe Quicksilvers are going back in.
Actually, that was, I think, a big change because this Windborn Cav in the Sylvankin don't have access to the Quicksilver. At least as it's written right now.
Yeah, but I think
So-
that on the forums on Fanatics it's been confirmed that they're going back in. I believe. I could be wrong.
It was an oversight. Yeah.
Yeah, there was
it
an
could
oversight. Yeah.
be. Just another reason to say that Sylvankin are the superior elves. But yeah, back to the other elves, that again is kind of a shadow nerf. I think that the Quicksilver Lancers, with their nimble upgrade and making them elite nerve of 15, 17, desperately needed the Pathfinder item in order to make them over the top effective. I think they're still good, but without constant Pathfinder, they're going to be less useful than what they were before.
Well, they're less maneuverable, but you said still give them boost of riding for the charge, right?
Yeah, I think they're still very very good though as a unit. I really like. I think they definitely needed that nerve bump, and then nimble as well. I think gives the army a very it makes the unit much more usable. I think when previously I think 14, 16, I think any sort of 14, 16 cav people kind of, it was always really hard to sort of work around that nerve. I think.
Well, with Jboots giving Pathfinder now, you could still do that janky play of popping it for the Pathfinder, maybe running entirely through the forest. That still works.
Yeah, you definitely can. It's just you're gonna have to play a little bit more tactical and a little bit more thinking ahead versus just easy mode. Put Caterpillar.
So it's a good thing though for elves, I think. Isn't it?
They don't need more power.
No.
Right. Next, Empire of Dust. Yen, take it away.
Yeah, so Empire Dusk, some good, nice little changes, I think, in this book. So you've got the Skeleton Deadeye crossbows became regular. I think the Revenant Cav got the standard 5-point discount. All the Cav got as well. The Sandborn Worm Riders got +1 nerve and life leech, an extra life leech, so they're now life leech 2. The reanimated Behemoth went up to, I think, a -17 versus the 16 that it had before. The Undead Worm, the dragon, the Bone Dragon, got a 35-point discount, which is great. And the Cursed High Priest got a 15-point discount as well. I think all of the changes are actually fantastic for the faction. The crossbows are an interesting one. They're pretty cheap unlock, 120 points, and 10 piercing 1 shots for the regiment. 10, is that right? 10. Yeah. And 8 for the troop. I think it's an interesting change. I think the regular makes them very playable now, a very viable choice for the price point at which they are at. Personally, for the way I build the army, I'm not sure. I don't tend to love having my line sort of broken up a bit by weak units that can be sort of broken through in that sense. Slightly different to the Enslaved Guardian Archers, which can fight as well, and you can sort of search them up together with your line. But I think there's a list in there that you could build with the regular Deadeye crossbows. With those piercing shots, I think they're very handy. The Worm Riders as well, I think it's a nice welcome change. Again, I feel a bit funny having one living unit amongst a bunch of shambling ones that can't be surged. I prefer having my sort of line sort of together and having everything being able to be surged. But they do provide a pathfinding unit that can be moved as a double, if you need to claim objectives, things like that. I think the 13, 15 on the regiments for the Worm Riders are actually something that is very, very handy. They're sort of nice, sort of fast, thick chaff in that sense now. You can sort of move them up to grab tokens early, things like that. So I think they're actually a very viable choice as well in the regiment size. The hordes I think are okay, but not too sure on them at the moment. I used to really enjoyed running Chariot Legions, and they might be a replacement for them possibly in terms of that speed, and sort of holding power. The Behemoth as well, I think the Dash 17 Defense 6 makes a big difference as well. The Chariot base, especially when you're playing in this whole withdraw era, could be very helpful as well, because you can just pivot and surge and get away without having to worry about the withdraw. So I think you'll probably see more of the Behemoth as well. The Undead Worm, I think the 35-point discount was great. So now it rivals the Greater Air Elemental, but I think a lot of people have said before, I don't think you'll see it's as good because of the 75 mil base. I think that's what holds it back a little bit. In terms of being able to jump over and surge or fit into spaces, that 25 mil makes a big difference. But you have access to Ra, who that Chariot living legend that makes everything melee 3 if you have the skeleton keyword, which is what the Worm has. Very useful. I've yet to really pull off a significant combo of Ra. I don't feel like Chariot heroes should be in the middle of the line, because if they do a frontal charge, you always have reform issues after, things like that. But again, he buffs the Worm again, with that point cost. And finally, the Priest, 50 points. I think everyone complained about him being too expensive. I think I've tried a list with 2 priests now with Surge and Heal. I think that 15 points makes a big difference, and there's a lot of healing capability now with your rerolls as well with the Priest. But yeah, so that's my sort of initial thoughts on the changes.
Adam.
I'd agree on everything. I think that the biggest change in my eyes is actually the crossbows becoming regular. One thing I don't know if Jan mentioned, but they do have elite ranged, so they are pretty potent at range with 10 attacks, elite, hitting on 5s, pierce 1. And being an Empire Dust player myself, I know the power of being able to abuse surge and get into range, or surge into cover and be able to, or into forest and be able to shoot out of it. So I see the skeleton crossbows actually competing with the enslaved guardians, and unit strength wise, it's not an issue, because enslaved guardians, their biggest thing was their only unit strength 2. But Deadeye crossbows unlocking and being half the points effectively is pretty significant in my mind. So, as far as everything else, I think they're all good changes. I think the Curse High Priest being 15 points difference is probably the next biggest thing. It allows for you to utilize him in other potential builds. I think EOD suffered from a very mono type build, which was you have to rely on the surge and the grind and the heal. I think that now with the variants of unlocks and the cheaper spellcaster, you potentially could see a gunline EOD come out, and I think it would be a very strong build.
Awesome. I noticed the Curse High Priest is discounted in its base cost, but it pays the normal price for Surge, but nearly everything else in EOD pays a discount for Surge, so I'm not sure if that's still holding it back a little bit.
We'll take what we can get, Paige.
It all helps.
All right. With that, let's move on to Forces of Nature, and we'll have Jeff take this one.
Okay, so it says here the Hunters of the Wild don't have any changes. But the Beast of Nature, the base cost went up by 10 points, but it gained Nimble for that. And the wing option went down 10 points. So the normal package that people take is going to be the same cost. I did used to run the one without wings. My biggest problem was that it lacked the nimble, so I could look at it, but yeah, I think you'd still end up just with the full package there. Keris used to have the Solar Staff was a one turn only, 24-inch range. Any hits and you disorder the unit. Now goes to an 18-inch range, and they're disordered if they're damaged, but you can use it all the time. I'd definitely be looking at adding that into the army. I think
Is that too good?
Very good. Yeah, I like that.
The answer is yes, it is too good, Paige, because
At 80
it's only
points.
80 points.
Yeah,
It's only 80 points.
Just
Yeah.
take it anyway, and if you need any spells, you can still add it in. You have
Yeah,
surge.
I think
That's
those
the
two
thing.
characters
You're-
are one of the biggest changes actually.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that those changes were coming in. I only found out about it myself when the book came out, despite playtesting. And I think they're huge. Yeah, they're really great now as well. Giving Charlotte the surge as well, when I think previously she didn't have surge.
And has elite on airbound.
Yeah, and I think what is it? It does the sparks. What's it called? Something sparks, where
That's
Static
pretty
shot.
rubbish.
static
Yeah.
shock. Yeah,
Yeah.
So
I think-
when you deal damage with lightning bolt, you may immediately cast wind blast based off the damage that you dealt. So if you do 2 damage lightning bolt, you get 2 wind
Two.
blast.
So you're gonna
Against
push
them.
away 1 on average. I'm not sure if
It
that's
did.
very useful.
Did go up
It-
15 points, but so
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
Carrion
I
I
think-
probably wouldn't use it myself, but I'd definitely use Keris.
Yeah, especially since Karis has access to Surge 8 for 30 points, bringing it into a whopping 110 for a second Surge caster.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to take the Gladewalker Druid with the Ring of Brokenness. So
As I said, I'll run
Sorry.
this without any surge and bring some flyers in next time.
Do you ever
I'm just
find
a
you have
little-
issues getting in range for movement 5 surge casters? Sometimes, the Charlotte, because she moves quicker. She does, doesn't she? I'm pretty sure.
she's speed 10
she's speed 10, yeah.
flying.
Yeah, so
Flying.
that could really help with the surge sometimes
Yeah.
with your
I
flyers.
like the item with the extra 6 inches on the spell. I think that's
Crown of the King or something like
Yeah.
that.
King, Crown
Yeah,
of the
that's-
Business King.
that's really
Yeah.
good when you're trying to get air elementals into charges and that.
You put it on the Gladewalker Druid.
Yeah. It's,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
then you have a much more range in both sides.
yeah. You can do
You
a
can spread
lot
out
of
your
stuff.
units more. Yeah.
Especially you can wind blast units out of the way to open up the gap to then surge them in.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
pretty tough.
I think that Forces of Nature are going to be the biggest broken army, and they're going to get a hard nerf come 4th edition. So play
Well, they
them while you
should've-
can, boys.
Yeah, they should have done something about the great air
Right.
elemental.
Yeah, I think that's a major consensus within all the veteran players is that greater air elementals were too good, and now the other things that's on the same level as them got nerfed. So they are now the big boogeyman.
Yeah, and the lack of the Pathfinder option just makes their army better again because they've got so much, the whole army gets it. So
Oh my
yeah,
god.
they're definitely in a good spot.
Very good spot.
Yeah. I feel if like the greater air elemental didn't exist, the beast of nature with that sort of nimble knowing option could be a lot more
Yeah, it was good.
viable.
Used to
Yeah,
be
I think it's a really good
before.
choice. I think it's
Yeah,
cheap.
yeah.
100, I think 150 points,
Absolutely.
nimble.
Yeah.
But because you want to take the other monsters, I think that's when it runs
Yeah.
into the problem, right? Yeah.
I think the old ones used
Yeah.
to be 130 points, and then you would add on things to it, and it was a great roadblock at 130 points. Like you wouldn't get the extra attacks or the vicious, etc., but you could add those in still.
Mm.
But
So were you talking about the power?
And it was nimble.
116 now. The
Yeah.
base is
Yeah, it's
116 now.
160, and if you take it without the wings, but you're definitely going to take the increased attacks, right, for 15
Yes.
more points, you're looking at 175 points for that Beast of Nature. 7 attacks, nimble, speed 7, 3s, crush 2, vicious.
Yeah.
It's really, and Pathfinder built in as well. Like
Yeah.
it's super solid.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you take a greater
The
air
wings.
elemental for 5 points more?
yeah, or you just put the wings on it anyway, and it
Yeah.
might be a thing of points. If you don't have the points and you want to add that into get a bit of variety into the list. It's
Well,
definitely good.
in a world that Greater Air Elemental doesn't exist, at 175 points, Beast of Nature on
Oh
foot,
yeah.
while
Yeah.
being good at a point difference of 175 versus 205 for the flying option, I think I'll still take the flying option.
Yeah,
Yeah,
flyers.
if it was something between like 150 versus 200, maybe the 150 has less stuff. Maybe I would consider, but at that
Yeah.
175,
for 30 points, you're going to take wings.
All right.
Move on to the next one.
Next one, Order of the Green Lady. The only change is that the Order of the Brotherhood on horses, they got that cavalry discount. They only come in regiment and horde sizes. So the regiment got a 5-point discount, while the horde has the 10-point discount. A thing to note is they still have the option to take Banner of the Green Lady, which is Pathfinder, for 15 and 20 points respectively. So I think the army overall has a stealth buff with the removal of Potion of the Caterpillar. So I am still very excited to play this army with that stealth buff. I think that's all there is to say about it. I do use the Order of the Brotherhood on cap, so that discount is very welcome. Yeah, I think that's all I would like to say about it. Next, we'll move on to Herd, and that's Yen.
Yeah,
No
so I think
changes.
this one's just the sort of stealth change to the Beast of Nature, maybe that could provide an option with the Herd. I don't believe there's any other changes that affect them in the army. It's just going to be the Beast of Nature at this stage. And so look, I mean, triple Beast of Nature, nimble, keep them cheap, at the 5 attacks, little mobile anvils in the Herd army that sort of really lacks anvils unless you want to take the earth elemental stuff, which can't move at the double. I think that there could be a list in there with the little nimble Beast of Nature to sort of block stuff up together with your harpies. Yeah, I think there could be a list there which will be helpful to the Herd. I do wish some other changes would have been brought into that list. I feel like Tribal Trappers could have been made regular to help open up the list a little bit more. Right now, the formation's kind of cool, but you pay hero tax because the Trapper regiments themselves don't unlock, and then you got to buy the tracker hero as well. So that's really all I want to say with the Herd. I think there's something in there with the Beast of Nature, something could be cool, but I think they needed a bit more help around the other parts of the army still.
All right. Yeah, I think it's another one of the factions that's not really loved by a lot of people and often gets overlooked when it comes to giving them buffs. Next up, we do have Forces of the Abyss, which has no change as well. I think they are in a decently good spot. A lot of people are talking about the double Cronius build. I'm not too sure about that though. I've only played the Cronius in last year's playtesting, and one immediate weakness I found with them is that they are unable to heal themselves, and so they are likely
That's why
to
you
be
run 2.
targeted down first.
Yeah. Then you're
running
wasting the
two-
Cloak of Death a bit. That's the only problem if you run them next to each other.
Yeah, so if you run them next to each other, it's also not the optimal way to do it, I feel.
Yeah.
So the way to break that is you run the Well of Souls, who takes all the wounds off the Cronius, and then the Cronius heals the well.
That's the list I've been running at the moment. So
one well and one
It's pretty
Cronius.
filthy.
1 well and two Cronius. Yeah.
One well and 2 Cronius.
It's a lot of points, but it's
it's a lot of points. Yeah.
But you've got
I
plenty
do
of
think
cheap units to go in there too. So
I do think the well is still slightly overcosted. So what do you think, John?
I think it's just a matter of, I played it a lot earlier on. So as long as you can get your orders right and getting your distances right, it's fantastic. It really is. Getting the Life Leech 5 back's another big thing. I think it's worth its points. The drop to speed 8 hurt it, but I still think it's good value. It's a little bit cheaper than what it used to be. So I find the combination very good. And as I said, you've got enough cheaper units that you can run to bulk the army up and have that good solid core, and then you've got your Molochs and that to provide the big hitting power. I've gone off the shooting units, the flame bearers a bit, the glade stalkers and that just over, they have it all over them now. You can't get, even if you get first turn, you can't get close enough to them.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep moving and shooting you. They've really lost their potency.
When the bowls got stronger, they kind of lost their pace.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm running my list that I'm running. I haven't gotten a lot of games with it, but I run a lot of Molochs. Once again, they might suffer in the shooting meta, but there's not a lot of shooting in my local meta, and they are a glass hammer, but they are probably the best glass hammer with the upgrade of vicious and brutal.
They are so good, aren't they?
Yeah, so I kind of like them a bit.
Things.
And my way of protecting them is to bring lots of them. So
Right.
I have 3 hordes of Molochs and 2 hordes, not 2 hordes, but 2 regiments of horsemen for a bit of speed so that I don't get bullied by
Right. Yeah, I'm just running the Abyssal Ghouls to give you that chaff type of thing for them. They really do need it. They need protection from shooting, and they need protection from charges. Once you've done that, they'll just eat things alive.
Yeah. And the Tortured Soul still have that Crush 1 Thunder 1, which is awesome.
Yeah. Just can't have everything. That's all. Had to drop them to get the other combo in.
All right. Next is Goblins. I put Adam's name on Goblins, but I don't know if you play any Goblins.
I don't play Goblins, but my best friend Travis Tim sure as hell plays them, so I know him well and good. So, changes to Goblins. Fleabag Chariots got cheaper by 5 points across the board. Sharpstick Throwers went down 15 points. The Big Rock Thrower and Mop Up Launcher both have Ignores Obscure for the cover changes. This is the first giant we've seen, but this giant, as well as any others in the game, now have the option of Rampage or Slayer. Both of them are free upgrade options, so you just pick in your list building which one you want. And then the Goblin Slasher is now unit strength 2 and has a 10-point upgrade option for a War Trombone on top of it.
It's pretty cool.
Seems pretty good, just saying.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Unit strength 2 is a new thing. I think going forward, having all Titans be unit strength 2 might be nice for them. They really do need some sort of buff, being such a huge and unwieldy footprint in getting tight nooks and crannies. So maybe they're just testing it with the Goblin Slasher models first. Doesn't hurt that they sell all the Goblins, all the Slashers.
It's true.
But
I agree. I would love to see Titans get that upgrade across the board as well.
Yeah, Trumpets seems to be a must take if you are on the Goblin Slasher. It's just a much better attack profile.
Yeah, well, you always target the trombones, don't you? If you can get something at them, but now it's going to be very hard to kill these things. You can't just shoot them off.
Yeah, it's very possible that you see Goblins with 6 War Trombones, 3 of them just being on top of Goblin Slashers.
Yeah, hopefully we don't see that in Australia, but
yeah, I'm not sure like they necessarily needed more shooting options, but the slasher wasn't being taken, so definitely needed something, and now I think it will be, but yeah, I think that shooting goblin list is still very much in ascendance, right? Like now.
I think one of the benefits to this change is the change to host Shadowbeasts. I feel like Goblins were, in my opinion, the most effective unit with host Shadowbeasts from the previous version of it. Because not only did you have Grani Snark, but the Magua and Joe, who had 7 attacks base with Crush 2 and has Duelist built in. With Vicious as well, he was probably like the third best unit in the game to target with Host Shadowbeast before. Probably Mikael and Grani being number 1 and number 2, probably interchangeably. Magua was easily point for point number 3 in my opinion. So having the top 2 individuals to cast that dirty spell on was extremely powerful, and you got it for dirt cheap with the army. So
yeah, and you had a caster who could move 10 inches and then cast or something like that on their
mounted on a flea bag,
yeah,
and being height 3, so it can see over everything. Still,
it couldn't stop it.
The previous Host Shadowbeast benefited from the blast, right?
It did, yes.
Yeah.
So that Grop Longnail also has blast D3. That's the guy who gives you a -1 if he hits you.
No, that was Grupp. Yeah, Grupp Longnail. I think that people took him. In my opinion, it was worse than just taking Magua and Joe to cast it on. I think Magua and Joe was a much better unit to cast it on outside of Grupp.
Yeah. Well, they're all good. So now,
you could take all 3 of them if you wanted, but if I had to pick 2, right?
Yeah. All right. What do you think of the Slayer and Rampage options for the Giant? Does it matter?
Can be interesting to see what people take.
I think it's cool. I think it allows you to just customize based off the meta or based off what you feel your army struggles against.
Yeah. Would people take 2 just to have both options, one of each?
I think if you take 2, you double down and take the same option. But that's just me personally.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because I never liked the Slayer and Rampage differentiation. I could take Rampage and then I come up against an ogre army with no goblins and like totally wasted.
Yeah, I found the Slayer on the Giants has really pegged back the large infantry. They're a real threat now to them.
Yeah, 2d6 + 8 into a 15-17 unit. I think it's very decent. Yeah.
Any of the high defense ones, they were crushing 4, so they didn't care about that. They definitely did bring the large infantry back a peg, I feel, since their introduction. So I'm not sure how many people would take the Rampage. I'd probably stay with the Slayer myself, but
That's interesting.
It depends on what's in the rest of your list.
Quite a lot of people like Rampage because when you're hitting infantry horde, they tend to have the higher nerf, and so you need the more attacks to crack them. So that tends to be the discussion, the reason why people like Rampage.
But I think if you're throwing a giant into an infantry horde, you're probably doing it wrong anyway. So
I'm of the same.
Not from the front, at least.
Even with Rampage, like average of what, a 22, 23 nerve, 24 on the high end, and you're only getting average of 15 attacks hitting on 4s with your Rampage option.
Yeah, it could be part,
doing.
Yeah. It could be part of a multi-charge, then that would make sense. Part of a multi-charge. Sorry.
But no, you're good.
All right, so let's go on to Halflings. Halflings, the Juggers, which is their heavy cavalry with Thunderous. I want to say 2, but I think they're only Thunderous 1. But they are defense 5. They dropped in points, 5 points in troop regiment and 10 points in the horde. The Howitzer, just a change of Ignore Obscure. And that's all the change. I think Halflings are still a very underplayed army. Not that they are not strong, but I think because they are a horde-based army and people haven't got around to buying enough Halflings to paint and put it on the table.
They'll just get better and better.
I think they have a lot of viable builds.
My opinion, with Spell Ward as their pretty much their army-wide special rule, I think they're going to be one of the top armies very shortly. I think Spell Ward is one of the best rules in the game now.
Yeah, I'm surprised with that.
Yeah, I guess.
I think for halflings, because they don't really have good access to Bane Chant, right? Not
They
really.
don't at all.
Yeah, they don't have it. So it's kind of like, well, you don't
Get
really,
the item.
yeah, you're not casting heal either, right? So it's kind of like it's just a flat out buff, positive for them in terms of a defensive rule. Yeah, and they get their sort of buffs from their rally as well. So get a buff in nerve versus protection in terms of other things.
Yeah. Having that ability to choose what you want each turn's massive. They're a very good army.
I think very cool army. Yeah, I think Australian Clash of Kings this year is going to have quite a few. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform. But I think they're also like particularly sort of susceptible to shooting as well. I think that's probably what they're weak against. Nightstalkers and the like.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how their meta sort of flattens out that way.
Yeah.
All right.
I like that. I feel like there's a lot of different build options for halflings. I've seen some that have no sorcerers at all, and they look pretty strong in general. And then there's others that have the triple saucer, and you go heavy into that portion of it. So I think there's a lot of different ways to build it. I don't know if there's a one that's going to be super optimal. But I think that they can combat the elf Gladestalkers with their own shooting and their own kind of gun line and hordes, which is not what an elf army wants to see as a horde faction across from it.
Okay.
They're only 18 inches, but aren't they those rifles?
The rifles are, but they have the organ
Bolts.
gun
They
type
have bolts and
units
rifles.
too. Yeah, they have a couple different things, and then they can long range threat with the generals on airleses, the aeronauts, the grenadiers.
DJs,
yeah, they just have a lot of tools, and they have the best trolls in the game.
Yeah, they're pretty cool, aren't they?
Yeah.
Edge grenadiers are like so
good.
Yeah. Like I said, they just have so many tools that it's hard to find the balance, I think.
Yeah.
And that might be part of the reason why you don't see many of them, right? Many halflings right now is because there are a lot of good units in there.
And they can put a lot of units on the table as well, with Braves unlocking. There's actually Goblins, slightly better Goblins unlocking. You get a lot of drops on the table. Like I say, multiple flyers, their own shooting against elite elves sort of thing. It's often there's only too many things to shoot at before you get shut down quite quickly. I think they're really an army to watch. I think they're really good.
Yeah, I think no one has figured out the winning formula yet, and once someone has started to figure out at least a way to win, and then it will rise in popularity.
Oh, it'd be great if there was multiple winning builds, right? Like, that's what you kind of
multiple winning
builds.
Yeah, but it always starts with one, right? And then people will start to play and experiment. All right, next we have Kingdoms of Men. Quite a lot of changes. The Knights have a drop in points. The Beast Cavalry has the Indomitable Wheel option now, which is great. And it can take both its upgrade. It used to be exclusive that you can either make them flying or you can make them more heavy. Now you can take both options. So if you took all the upgrades, it comes in at 280 at a Flying Cavalry, Flying Large Cav points cost. I think it's pretty respectable and pretty up there in terms of power level with Dracons and the Light Dracons and my Order of the Forsaken, that is, because Indomitable Will is good, right? It's Fearless, which is the best form of waiver mitigation. Artillery, just changing the wording to obscure. Ballista got a huge point discount. It's only 60 points now. Cannon becomes ignore concealed, which means it's rubbish. And Giant has both options. So if you were to take triple war engines, it will probably be the siege artillery instead. Although
a couple of cheap ballistas in there. Get a few
Yeah, I
wins
think
in.
overall it's great. I thought the Beast Cavalry were crap before this change because the inability to take both options. When you take one or the other, they just become very subpar versions of what they are. And now being able to take both brings them in line in terms of their power level. Yeah, Kingdoms of Man still a very flavorless list, and of course you can flavor it to whatever team of army you like. Overall, good, and I think not a lot of people play them more because that they are a little flavorless rather than them being a little weak on the power curve, but they are getting better right now.
No, I really like the Beast Cav change. I didn't realize that until just now. So I think I agree because Dracons are what 275 or 260 base, something like that. And being able to be fearless over top of them, and then the vicious that you get with the other upgrade counteracts the elite. They're effectively the same unit, just with the ability to be fearless for a turn. So that's very good.
And an army that's got access to cheap troops, which the elves don't seem to have so much.
Yeah. Don't get me on those archer changes.
Let's get you onto the Nightstalker changes. That's a problem.
All right, Nightstalkers.
Sure.
Oh wait, League of Rhordia in between.
Oh well, League of Rhordia hasn't
Effective
changed.
change.
Yeah.
League of Rhordia, I think they're still in a very good spot. They sort of dropped off in popularity, but I think they gained a lot of flavor in the last clash in terms of having the different upgrades for the war dogs, dogs of war.
Yep.
Do they still have it? I'll check.
Yeah,
they're
I think
still
the
there.
option's still there. Yeah.
They have new hero options, which are quite flavorful as well.
And they'll get some of the stuff from Kingdoms of Men as well, I suppose. There'll be some, maybe not.
In the last
I
clash, the Baron changing from inspiring humans to inspiring everything is really great for him. Very inspiring, in fact. And he has 4 attacks, which makes him a very good low point hero disruptor.
He is the same price as an elf army standard bearer, and I am not salty.
A good comparison. You do have an elite standard bearer.
Elite 1 attack standard bearer, yes.
That's right, yeah. Should be happy with what you got.
Yeah, you're right. I should be.
All right, moving on to Nightstalkers.
It's on 4s, defense 4. Not salty at all. Sorry.
Nightstalkers, Adam.
Yeah, so Nightstalkers, pretty much everything I've taken in my army is now changed. So Scarecrows are lower points. So the troop and regiments are 5 points less. The horde is 10 points less. And everybody got bumped down in attacks. So the troops 3 less, and the regiment and horde are 5 less attacks. Reapers also got cheaper, 10 points for the troop, 20 for the regiment, and also lost 5 attacks each. Mind Screeches are height 4, which I don't think is actually a big change or necessarily a change at all. Horror Riftweavers are no longer Aura Spell Ward, they just have Spell Ward themselves. Soul Flares are now speed 8. And the Banshee cannot take an item with the double cast upgrade. So anything that was really good in Nightstalkers is now a little bit more tame. The only thing I would say is Scarecrows, I think, actually got buffed. You weren't taking them for the attacks. You were taking them for cheap unlocks.
Yeah.
So
I'm the same, even with the Reapers. Even with the Reapers, I'd be happy to take it at the lower cost with a little bit less attacks. But I prefer cheaper units, so
no,
I'd be more
I agree.
likely to take it.
the way I played them, I don't think the changes for Scarecrows or Reapers are actually a big deal. It
No.
gives you a couple more points options. It's not enough, in my opinion, or in my particular build, to actually add another unit, which is what I would want to do. So it's more likely just points invested in magic items, which in turn is just trying to, improve the units that actually got hurt, which the Horror Riftweaver, that's the biggest, saddest thing that I have here. Or a Spell Ward was too good. You could just take anything but that. Why'd you take that?
Yeah. The Mind Screech, I think they've done that to stop them sitting behind the hordes of scarecrows and casting without cover.
Right.
And in case you got shocked by the podcast or hearing it on the podcast.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't think Mind Screeches need to be hid behind units, though.
No, but that's what they were doing. A lot of players were doing that.
Yeah.
So,
The units that need to be hid are actually the Soul Flares, in my opinion. So,
yep.
But
you think Speed 8 is enough?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yep.
There were several options that I kind of threw out there as ways to kind of tame that unit, as well as Horror Riftweavers tamed them, because I think those two were the keys in the army. And they took the one with the Horror Riftweaver, the path with the Horror Riftweavers that I think was the biggest nerf for them. And for the Soul Flares, I think Speed 8's not the biggest nerf they could have done, but I think it's the right amount. Sometimes when you're nerfing, it's like a pendulum. You're too good on one side, so when they nerf, the pendulum swings to where they're just unplayable. I don't think it happened necessarily for any of these nerfs, but I think in general, all of them combined, it definitely neuters the Nightstalkers to where I don't think you're going to see, at least in the US, a 60-man tournament, you'd have 5 to 10 Nightstalkers at any given time. I think you're going to see less than 5 probably. So
wouldn't stop me playing them at all. I think they're fine.
Yeah, I think they're still a very good army, just on balance. Yeah.
There's a lot of other units in the army that are still really strong and really good.
Great army.
I think this was just what did the U.S. Master win with? Let's just take a look at all these.
Yeah, it's a tradition. I think whoever wins the UK Clash or US Clash or Masters gets their stuff nerfed.
A few of the armies I won CanCon with, they knocked the units down the next.
I think Jeff used to take all those Placidum troops, and people saw that, and then they nerfed that.
Well, I just want to say, where was the Keith Conroy herd nerf, and then the Eric Trowbridge orc nerf? Like, come on, they were broken.
One player playing them, so that doesn't count.
They were nerfed in terms of the shooting getting better in general, especially for the orc side. Right. Immediately after Eric Trowbridge's orc win, a lot of the shooting got increased in power level, which did hurt his build.
That's true.
Very true. I've spoke to you earlier on this, Adam, but you said the key one was losing Spell Ward Aura, because the Aura is what helps the Nightstalkers be a little bit more consistent against a wide variety of armies, especially against Lightning Bolt armies. So with the loss of that, the Nightstalkers have a weakness against armies with high lightning bolts, which will then cause it to be not as consistent playing against the wide field of armies.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I built my army was very much MSU, or multiple small unit style. Which Nightstalkers thrive with in several ways. They're stealthy, so they have a natural defense against the shooting builds. They don't need to take Inspiring, so having a lot of units and not investing into Inspiring it allows you to really curve out and have more units and take more. And then the spell ward protected you against the spell spam lightning bolts in particular. So the triple combination of all that is really what allowed my army to thrive. And when you kind of take one of those pillars away, it's just a situation where you look at going into a tournament, whether it's a 5-game, 6-game tournament. In one of those games, I expect to see lightning bolts or a heavy magic build. Lightning bolt, drain life, whatever it might be. And the army's just not going to be at the power level it was once before. So it goes from a 5-win army to a 4-1 or a 3-2 type army in a tournament. So
interesting take. So next we'll move on to Northern Alliance. Jeff, could you cover it?
Yeah, so Pack Hunters went down by 10 points. The Ice Kin Hunters went up by 10 points. So they're similar to
the Gladestalker equivalent.
Yeah, the Gladestalker ones. Frost Giants got the option of Slayer or Rampage, like all the other giants. Ice Kin Bolt Thrower went down 15 points. I think that's quite a nice change. I think might see some more of them. Lord on Frostfang went to Crushing 2, Thunderous Charge 1 instead of Crushing 3. Not a massive change, but he's normally known for his second attack, not his first one. First one goes in and then he'll shoot off and hit something in the flank or whatever. So it's a little bit of a nerf. I don't know whether it's enough, but a little bit there. Serakina, no change. And we've got here again, Hrim, who just gets the says no change, no rampage option.
Yeah, he doesn't get the rampage option.
Yeah, so not massive things, but I like the units like the Pack Hunters and the hybrid units that are still cheap enough to take. And
I didn't understand the points drop. I thought they were really good already, the Pack Hunters. Yeah. I was surprised by that point drop. But,
I like the Varangur ones better.
Yeah, I think Tom Robinson piloted the Pack Hunter spam to victory in a tournament.
Yeah, he used them with the javelins. I've been using them with the bows, and quite effective. I know he said in his last tournament he had a little bit of trouble with the shooting, didn't get that much of it off. I think with the bows, they're not as powerful, but you do get a couple of rounds of shooting off in every game. And then they're still decent in combat. They're a very good unit.
Okay.
Again, another unit that has Pathfinder built in. So yes. I think you're going to see a lot of it even before it was dropped in points. So
Yeah. No, they're a nice option to have in there. Varangur, we'll go straight to them. They're obviously part of Northern Alliance and no changes there, other than the ones like the Lord on Frostfang. So
the only inherited changes would be the Lord on Frostfang and the Frost Giant options.
Yeah, that's it. So not a massive difference there. And that's what I've been using the last couple of tournaments, and I find them quite effective. And I haven't been using the Lords either in the last couple of tournaments.
They're quite a strong army with lots of options because they do have the cheap chaff options that Northern Alliance doesn't have. They have the cavalry options as well.
Yeah, the cavalry is the biggest difference, having the mounted sons, I think. Otherwise, I like a lot of things in Northern Alliance, but the cavalry is the big swinger in Varangur.
All right.
So with the change to the Lord on Frostfang, do we expect to see more Thanes on Frostfang?
I've been running them anyway myself. I just run the Thanes. I don't run the Lords. I just find, yes, they are good, but they're still like 200 odd points, and I can get obviously not as good a result with a Thane, but I can get a lot more things on the table with still.
Yeah, and it's 65 points cheaper.
Yeah, it's a massive amount of difference.
So you could take 3 Thanes to the 2 Frostfang Lords effectively.
Yeah, and they're still causing those threats, and it's like taking a dragon or taking a a mid-sized one, they still have similar effects on the game.
Yeah.
Cheap
I
option.
also
they
find if you model it big and scary, then people treat it as if it's big and scary. So
very true.
You use the same model and call them Thanes instead.
Yes,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
Next up, Ogres.
Ogres, right?
Jeff still,
so, yeah. So the army construction has changed. So you can only use 3 of the warrior regiments to unlock, which is probably a good thing. I know a lot of people were spamming them. I didn't see it much here in Australia, but I heard about some of the tournaments in the US where it was happening. Siege breakers went up by 15 points. I thought it only went up by 10. It says here 15.
Yeah, they used to be
Weren't they 240
for the horde.
Oh, were they 235? Okay,
Yeah.
I thought they were 240 before. Well, anyway, that's been a long time coming. They deserve to go up. Red Goblin Slasher has that trumpet option, the same as the Goblins, and then the giant options, and then Nomarok. That's probably the biggest one, is going up by 25 points. That's going to hurt a lot of the ogre players, but he was way too good for his cost, obviously. But it's a big jump.
I think in the past you used to see 2 extreme ends of builds. One is a lot of siege breakers, and the other end would be all the 9x9.
Yep.
And this changes seem to encourage a hybrid.
Yeah, a bit more balance, and they'll still do as well. They'll still get well.
In my opinion, the hybrid was the best of the builds anyway. Where you had 2 or 3 regiments unlocking, and then a couple of hordes of siege breakers. It went up in points, obviously. Siege breakers, Nom was always in there, but I think the hybrid build is it has much less of a skew, so it's much more of a balanced list, and it doesn't suffer against the high skew list that you might see at a tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're still a very viable list.
With 2 or 3 regiments gives you that 2 or 3 more hero unlocks that bumps up your drop count. Siege breaker no longer being the superior option all the time. I think you'll see 1 horde of hunters at least, especially with no Pathfinder. Items.
Even the warriors are still good value as well.
Yeah. And
I think it just gives the intention back to what the original design was, which is giving ogres a bit of a cheaper unlock option, and not turning it into just a warrior.
That's a good change, isn't it?
But we still really need to one build, which is the hybrid build.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing they could have nerfed in the army is probably the warlocks, but since they left the warlocks the way they are, ogres still have a very strong build, which is going to be lightning spam.
Yeah, lightning spam, and also their drain life at 20 points and can go up to, it's ridiculously good.
Yep.
I know, I've used
it. Yes. Again, see why I want Spell Ward over here, Jeff? Give it back to me.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Well, they did get a warlock nerf, just unit. That 1 warlock they got nerfed.
It's true, that's something. I think you still take him probably, especially if you're going for a lightning bolt spam.
Yeah, it'd come down to points, I think, what options you got. If you can fit him in, you do. If it means the difference between getting another horde or not, then maybe you drop him down to just a normal warlock.
Yeah, very true.
Okay, I threw Adam under the bus to cover orcs. Are you able to cover orcs?
Sure. Yeah, I am. Again, I don't play them specifically, but one of my club mates plays them, so fairly familiar. But the School Raider Chariots went down in points. So 5 points, I think it was for the regiment option, if I'm not mistaken. There are troops and regiments. So School Raider Chariots they're the shooting version. The troops 5 points cheaper, regiments 10 points cheaper. The War Drum, now you can only take a single one of the upgrade options. So before you could take Dread and Mounted on the War Wagon. Now you can only choose from one of those upgrades. They are not Living Legend unique, so you can take multiple War Drums and take all of them
One
with
of each.
Dread, or one with Dread, one with the Wagon. Yeah, so you can definitely customize still. And then the Giant has the Rampage Slayer option, as we've discussed before.
I don't think the wagon option was ever worth it, but it becomes a necessity if you're running them alongside cavalry to keep up with them, I guess.
Yeah. I actually like their formation if you were wanting to keep up with cavalry, because it makes that War Drum mounted, and then it gives it a spellcaster level, and it has Bane Chant. So it was one of those cheeky things where since you gained a spellcaster level, you can get options to the library spells. So you could then take, like, Veil of Shadows was the most popular one, because orcs die to shooting, it turns out. So, and you have Bane Chants because more crushing strengths, more better. So.
All right. I think we have too much to talk about orcs, so I'll move on to Riftforged Orcs. Their Giant got the Rampage Slayer option. The Stormforged Shrine changed in the sense that because of the Host Shadowbeast rule change, they now start off with Host Shadowbeast 2 as a base, which they can get up to +3 dice being near orcs. And it has a spellcaster level 2 because the Host Shadowbeast depended on the spellcaster level. The Riftforger, same thing because of the Host Shadowbeast wording change. So it starts off with Host Shadowbeast 3, and it's considered a spellcaster level 2. So I think the biggest problem with the Shrine is that it can be hexed. That's the biggest issue with it, which kind of cripples at least that unit or builds that center around that unit, which is a shame. I have theory crafted a Riftforged Orcs list, and it doesn't have the Shrine because maybe it's because of who I am. I built an Alpha Strike list, and I was like, the Shrine can't keep up with these flyers. So yeah, that's the build that I still go with. I think they have some interesting speed options with Tona, which is their Living Legend, having that Storm Strike on 5s and suffer -1 to hit. They have very cheap flyers. They are Stormbringer on Hellstrike Manticores, only have 5 attacks and 13-15 nerf, but they are only 160 points with Brutal. They do have the Flying Horde option in the Hellstrikers, which has some inbuilt sustainability option in Life Leech, and it does have Brutal to help bring the math over the line. So I still think that the Alpha Strike build is a better build for them. I'm not sure if the infantry build is a viable build.
I had a friend in New South Wales been using them. A very mixed list, big hordes of infantry, the flyers, some shooting, the shrine, etc. And he ended up winning the tournament with them, and it was a very good list. So,
yeah, I think, in my opinion, the Ambrox monster is necessary to take at least 2 of them.
That's the shooting one?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 of them.
It's so cheap. It's so cheap. And it's basically a bolt thrower type unit, but it's a monster that scores as well and can fight in combat respectably, at least. So I think that the orcs, I think that's one of the big reasons why the normal orcs suffer, is they don't have very good shooting options. So I think that Riftforgers having better shooting options and also an Alpha Strike army with Hellstrikers allows them to actually compete.
Right.
Yeah, I think like similar to the Eric Trowbridge sort of army with, big blocks supported by the Morax to sort of control the board a little bit with the bigger charge range. You get the Amberox now that provides shooting, that can chaff as well, get in the way, and then you've got the Hellstrikers. I think it becomes almost like a stronger version of it, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's more expensive. That's the issue. I think that Trowbridge really thrived on the great axes being they're elite, but they also put out a much bigger hurt for their point for point. I guess they're same points as Legionnaires, but more axes. They still have Orklings, so. But the nerve is then the next thing. Riftforgers don't have access to the Rally 2 War Drum.
For the drum.
Yeah, so it then becomes you're more elite. You hit better, but you don't survive as long with the amount of units that you have. So. And I think that Moraxes especially will suffer without the Rally 2. Yeah. A dash 15 defense 4 on an elite unit of 175 points seems quite fragile.
Yeah, the strength of Eric Trowbridge's list being in the Great Axe, because there are 25 attacks, hit on 3, crush 2 with the one use brutal item. So on its own, they have enough attacks to one-shot a 15-17 defense 5 unit on its own, which is the main strength of that list.
And they were effectively a 23-25 nerve.
Yep.
Yeah, with the drum. That's true.
Yeah. With a very poor shooting meta at the time.
That is also very true.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Ratkin. Their shredder now is ignores concealed, which is crap. Burning Daughter is still around, but I don't know what the profile is, so not gonna bother about that. So the formation used to be very good because it is basically effectively giving you 3 extra drops. You can just drop the 3 units first and then redeploy them at the end in a list that already has lots of drops. It really dominates how you can out-deploy your opponent. And with this kind of big nerf to Shredder, maybe the formation won't be as popular anymore because the formation comes with 2 Shredders. But I do think that Shredder, it got 1 extra attack, that blast, in its last change. So that might still mean it's still okay, even though it's been nerfed like that. I don't know, but I think it's quite a big deal that Ignores Concealed is crap now. Yeah, Ratkin is still a very good list with lots of options. So I think that's still pretty good. Yeah, I think that's all I'd like to say about them. Anyone like to add in? I guess not.
Nah.
All right.
Ratkin's always been a good army, so
Yeah.
I think they're just fine.
Nothing changed. Yeah.
Salamanders, the Kaizenor Lancers Regiment got a 5-point discount. Those are your cavalry. They are a crushing 1, thunderous 1 unit, but they were not very popular, so they received a discount. Commodomes, effectively the same. Ignores cover becomes obscured. They do have the slasher, but instead of having the trombone, because it's Gekuta riding them, they don't get the trombone upgrade. Instead, they have their weak ballista upgrade becoming stronger, but it's not the upgrade that we want. I'm trying to flip and find it right now. The base attack was a sharp stick thrower, 2 attacks hitting on 5 blast, D3 piercing 2 steady aim, but doesn't have ignore cover. The upgrade is 10 points, making it more painful in piercing 3 and vicious range, but what it needed is to be able to hit better. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a shame. It does have that unit strength 2 upgrade of that all slashers get.
Which is good, yeah.
The Phoenix received the same changes, and unlike Basilea, the Phoenix, there's no Samacris in Salamander. So if you like a good healing options, Phoenix has always been it. and so it's a straight up buff at this point of time.
There's also one little extra buff as well, that the fire elemental got a wild charge aura for salamanders.
That was in the last edition.
Or was that in the last one as well? Was that?
patch. Yeah, they have
okay.
an option
just never seen
for
it. Yeah.
wild charge 1, I think. Wild charge.
Okay.
Who got that? Sorry.
Greater fire elemental has
Greater fire element.
But only in salamanders. Yeah.
only in salamanders has a wild charge 1 for salamanders. I don't think anyone takes it. You just take the base greater fire elemental because it's pretty good since the last edition. They got bumped from melee 4 to 3.
So like the greater water elemental getting the what's it,
Greater water elemental has more attacks, if I'm not wrong.
No,
But it's still at melee
you've got that option of healing everyone within 6 inches.
Radiance of Life.
Radiance
or,
of Life, yeah.
Water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Only in the Green Lady.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It came in the same time as that fire one did.
Right. Yep.
Only in Green Lady.
What? Wild Charge for Salamander only does seem pretty bad. Most of your Salamanders are a counter charge unit. Yeah, they're not charging themselves. So. Although I guess with the Lancers, maybe it's worth it. Oh, Lancers have Salamander spell or special.
And the rhinos as well, I guess.
Rhino.
Okay. I see.
Rhino.
Greater fire.
I never seen much value in a 14-inch charge range increasing to 15.
Unless you're playing other armies with 14-inch charge range.
Very few have it though.
The Salamander
like
Unblooded, who already have wild charge T3, can get a decent threat charge for a very cheap unit.
That's true.
I like that how we tend to look at the expensive options, and Jeff always look at the cheap option and how to
Very true. Yep. Half my lists normally don't have anything over 200 points, but the latest one.
Speaking of cheap options, though, I think that the Lancers are actually. I thought the Lancers were pretty good before, and now getting reduced in points even more. Like 190 points for a 14-16 defense 5 crush 1 thunder 1 unit is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're melee 4, but they make up for it with their 20 attacks instead.
Yeah.
So as far as a cavalry unit goes, they're just on par with the other elite cav, but they're 10 to 15 points cheaper than most of them, it looks like. So I think you might see more Lancers.
Yeah. And I always like the Tyrants. They're also a good hammer option alongside the Morlocks, but
they don't have that keyword, do they? Because then they'd be.
No, I'm not saying that they benefit from the wild charge, but they do already have wild charge D3.
Yeah, no, I know. I was just going to say,
just seem to have fallen out of favor in an increased shooting meta.
Yeah. Well, they're going to suffer a bit
Salamanders
without the Pathfinder item, because every Tyrant's had Pathfinder and Strider.
It's true.
They'll feel that.
Good thing I only filled one of them. So with the point discount in the Phoenix, I could buy Strider on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. All right. We're coming close to the finish line. We're left 2 armies. First up is Trident Realm of Neretica. That's Jeff.
Okay, so Riverguard Dam Busters received a point discount of 5 points for the regiment and 10 for the horde. Still not a fan of them, but they're getting more and more playable. The Coral Giant.
By small margins. Every
small margins. They're still not great value.
No.
The melee 4 is the big kicker for them.
Knowing Mantic, they should have went with a much bigger swing in buffs since they have them buster models.
Yeah, they should do.
Yeah, they're a nice model. Like I would buy them.
Yeah.
But they're just they're not very good
Just not good.
unit at the moment. Yeah.
Coral Giant got the normal upgrades with the Slayer and Rampage, and the Leviathan's Bane went down 10 points, which I think, again, I like all those options for the bolt thrower type units. They're definitely more playable now. Adds to something because they're not known as a great shooting faction, so it does give them another option. And it's got that thing of pulling the people forward, so you could use them to bring them forward while your combat units are marching up the board nice and quick. Shoot those
Glade Stalkers.
They shoot the Glade Stalkers and bring them forward so they can't back off far enough. It definitely could work. So, yeah. They're a great faction. I love Trident Realm. So
They're very different, right? Because they have ensnare throughout most of their units. So you deal with them quite differently from the rest of than dealing with other armies.
Yeah.
You shoot them, right?
Yes, they still hate shooting. Yeah, that's one where I did use the banner of Abbetshire.
Yep.
Yeah.
With tool getting better, they have stealthy. You see tools more often, and they do have stealthy. Right. Lastly, let's move on to Undead. I'm not sure if any Undead players here, so I'll just read off the changes and you guys can chime in. Soul Reaver Infantry, it's kind of a big change like the Reapers. They have -5 attacks on both profiles and a -15 and 20 points respectively for troop and regiment. Revenant Cavalry receive a 5-point discount, as with all Revenant Cavalry. And being Balefire Catapult, no change effectively, being just not obscured.
Yeah.
The
biggest one is the Soul Reavers, isn't it? That's the one.
Yeah, but they're still very good, right? I think 20 attacks.
There's nothing there to
decent
complain
point
about, really.
Yeah, so
they become cheaper. You get a few less attacks. They still hit like a truck. You know,
the Undead list still writes itself, in my opinion.
And there's lots of good.
Still very good. Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how it writes where you guys are from. Right now, there's a clear meta happening, specifically in the southern regions of the states. So,
the
white spam.
Yeah. 5 white hordes, 6 white hordes.
No,
that's what we're seeing.
So why the sudden rise in that particular list? Because that list existed beforehand, right? Like it isn't a
whites haven't changed in a bit.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that whites, I think the thing that puts them over the top is the brutal. So right now, points wise and whatnot, there's no reason to take Soul Reaver Infantry over whites. Like Soul Reaver Infantry are 30 points cheaper, but effectively damage wise, they're the exact same. And whites have speed 7 and fly built in. So why not take them? Also, they're shambling, so you potentially can get some surge options. Just leave yourself open for surge options anyway. Yeah. So
once the game mixes up, that's when they are surging in, isn't it? And
exactly.
Yeah.
So was the argument then the extra 5 attacks at 255 points, 250 points, made them a more viable choice compared to whites? Is that the argument?
Yeah, so effectively, Soul Reaver Infantry had the overkill power, so they could run into almost anything in the game in the front and pick it up.
Yeah.
Now, whites, they don't necessarily have that hitting power, but compared to a 20 attack Soul Reaver Infantry, they're very, very similar.
Yeah, I do think I heard that whites were always meant to receive a nerf to the brutal. That means they should have had their brutal removed, but it never happened. So with everything else going down in power level, whites are being more prominent.
Yeah. They're still the most prominent one in the lists I've seen. They're the main ones that
I still would approve of the Soul River change in the loss of attacks and points, because in the mid tables or even in newbie games, they are quite dominating. Like people will underestimate, fail to kill off the Soul River infantry, and then you just one shot everything. And if you can't turn around stuff to deal with it fast enough, you'll just keep healing too by life leeching, and then it's a terrible experience at lower tables.
Yeah.
I mean, like arguably Soul River infantry, you can screen a bit better as well. Compared to whites who are taller. Yeah, whites are fearless, which is always good. But you can screen the Soul Reapers. Compared to whites, I think it's still very good. Like, I think that's an interesting observation just from that 5 attacks, seeing the rise of just white spam instead being because of that marginal efficiency, I suppose.
I personally, if I had to pick the 2, I'd still be going whites over the 25 attack ones. Just the other
I mean,
bonuses
speed
they
7
get.
fly. Speed 7 fly is actually
surge.
very powerful.
Yeah.
Especially with the changes to the multi-charging ability. It will allow you to get units like a horde of zombies or legion of zombies. You can get units like that to sink into the front lines of the enemy and just sit there and grind. And then in previous edition, you wouldn't be able to do a double charge once your zombies are in the front and your whites want to hit a flank by flying over. But now the zombies can slide if need be, and the whites can close the door and hit that flank. So I think that you're going to see a change potentially in the way you look at combats, and possibly you want those units that stick around for more than one turn as the chaff frontlining type units.
Right. I'm not sure if overall Undead really required more nerfs, because you don't see them in the top tables anymore. But this was a change that was a long time coming, but it's just unfortunate that it's happening now when they're not dominating the top tables.
That is interesting, right? Like, I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily a reflection of the strength of Undead, because if you look at all their units, they're all still very good. Like, and I think they're all viable. Like Wraiths are viable, Whites are viable, Revenant Cav, are viable in terms of like the troops, things like that. Like almost all their like zombie trolls as well. That's a viable selection as well with their, the vicious.
Yeah.
I feel like Undead
are the number of top players playing it, really.
Yeah, I think it's almost like it's just the player deciding to pick it up, and you probably see the result. And I think as a faction, like I would kill to have Soul River infantry in EOD, right? Like, like a fast, smashy, sort of unit, right? Like a hammer, that's not just Guardians. And I think like what Undead really sort of represent is just I think a really strong, well-rounded faction in any selection. I think you could do well with any sort of unit in that list, without necessarily having to go, white spam. But that's looking at how the Australians sort of play with a bit more mix, less spam in that sense. I don't know, but
yeah. Well, and I agree that the only reason why Undead haven't performed well at top tournaments is that the top players aren't picking them up, basically. But if the 2 players that have recently been playing that white spam continue, you're going to see them win tournaments, because it was Brad McKay, former U.S. Master, who was playing the 6 Horde white spam, and then it's Dustin Howard, former U.S. Paragon winner for Masters, who has also finished top 5, top 10 several years at U.S. Masters. He was playing 5 hordes of whites and 1 horde of zombie trolls with the bruised sharpness. So basically 6 hordes of whites.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the one he painted in a day, is that right, or whatever, in a week, or whatever? He put something up there. So,
it was. It was like a week or a month or something like that. Yeah, it's a gorgeous looking army, and he painted it in a ridiculously short period of time. So
With that,
That would be scary to face, I must admit.
We'll see how it performs. It is quite expensive. White's at 260, although they're very good. So we'll see how it performs.
Yeah.
With that, I'll just round things up by saying that there are some mistakes in the books. Once again, we got this information from Michael C. Carter's blog. Until somebody loses an eye, he listed some of the mistakes. One thing I do remember from the siege rules, if you're playing siege, the walls are 18-20 nerf, not 8 and 10. It's a huge difference. In Elves, Madriga is ignores concealed now instead of ignores cover, which means
so she's trash.
Silvery's cavalry in Sylvan Kin should receive the discount same as the Elves. Forces of all Scotch Wings should be irregular. Gacamac should be 220 points. That's an orc living legend. And Trident Realm of Narratica, Death Horror Eternal should still have Fury. And yes, with that, that concludes our review of the Big Red Book. I would just like to end off by saying not if, but when 4th edition is in the works, I do hope that a lot of things get reworked on or looked at individually, because the sweeping changes of inspiring conditional becoming inspiring unconditional, it made suddenly a lot of units viable and suddenly a lot of units not viable at the same time. So a lot of casters that don't have inspiring became much less viable. Standard barrels become much less viable. So I know it's a fix, mid-edition fix, but if you're doing 4th edition, you should look at every profile and decide whether they should have inspiring or not. Same as the Arcane of Library and the Arcane or whatever, Library of Arcane Knowledge spells. I think you should look at every individual casters and decide which of these spells they should have access to. Yep.
I would personally say, with that inspiring, that I think every hero option in the game should at the very least have self-inspiring. Because if you're a hero and you can't inspire yourself, it seems a little obscure to me. So, and then potentially seeing inspiring change into, you could have various differences of inspiring, like a 3-inch, 6-inch, 9-inch bubble. And then make the inspiring talisman just bump up your aura range potentially. I think that would allow you to see a large variety of characters and viability as well for all those characters.
Definitely. Well, we've come to the end of the show. It's been a long episode. It's going to be a mega one. So thank you all for staying to the end. I know that it has way overshot our expected recording time. So just any shout outs or any last words that you guys like to say?
So I enjoyed it and learned a lot myself doing it. So it's been good.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Paige. Yeah, it's good.
It's like a list building workshop at the same time on top of discussing the changes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having us, Paige. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it's been a pleasure and honor to have such esteemed people on the show as well. So I'll just end things off with, if you're watching this on YouTube, do like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. If you're listening to this on a podcast, do drop a positive review. I do have a Patreon as well for doing these content. So if you like to, please check it out. And with that, I'll end the show. Goodbye, everybody.
No matter.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.